Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear elders, sisters, and children, Assalamu alaikum. I would like to welcome each one of you to the USA Jamaat's 2020 Virtual Annual Conference. Although this year has presented us with many challenges and changes in lifestyle due to the impact of the coronavirus, we are very grateful to still have the opportunity and resources to hold our annual different and new format. As most of you are aware, the USA Jamaat, which domestically goes by the name Lahore Ahmadiyya Islamic Society, has been holding an annual convention for over 30 years. Over the past dozen years or so, we have included a symposium in our annual convention tailored for the education of non-Muslim guests, which includes clergy, academics, interfaith leaders, and community activists. In our symposium, we address a topic concerning Islam that is relevant to current events so that we may offer an educational opportunity to dispel misinformation about the religion of Islam and also effectuate an appreciation for the valuable lessons to society that is available from Islam's teachings. As a result, mashallah, our symposiums have become much admired and anticipated by the local interfaith community. And these symposiums also offer our members information that they are then able to utilize in their own engagements with others in their respective locales. And just as a reminder, we have made available the presentations from symposiums over the past several years on our YouTube page, and we encourage you to make use of them and share them with others. Now, because of the particular circumstances we face, being in the midst of a pandemic, we felt it advisable early on in the year to make the decision to not have the normal annual convention physically in a hall in Columbus, Ohio, with a lot of guest attendees as we normally do. And we thought it was a good opportunity to have an online program focused specifically for our members. Hence, the title of the program today, The Alleged Claim of Prophethood, Effective Strategies to Clarify Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's Claims. Today's program will be more like a workshop for our members, an opportunity to learn from presentations about a topic that is very well known to each of you, but perhaps with some new insight and perspective. As all of you are aware, there is a great misunderstanding prevalent about Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad and the status that he actually claimed for himself. It is generally believed that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be a prophet, and that such a claim is in violation of the entrenched Islamic belief in Prophet Muhammad being the seal or the last of the prophets. We see the phrase, quote, who claimed to be a prophet, end quote, commonly found after the name Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in religious, academic, and lay literature alike. Every Lahore Ahmadi knows the falsity of this view, and there is much literature available from the Lahore Ahmadiyya Jamaat explaining what Hazrat Mirza Sahib actually claimed and what he denied. What we would like to do today is to provide some perspective on how to structure points when discussing this issue with those who advance the belief that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be a prophet. It is important to appreciate the assumptions that are relied upon by those with opposing views, so that one is able to address the specific issues causing misunderstanding. As an example, the following is a valid argument form. If premise one is, all birds fly. And if premise 2 is an ostrich is a bird, it is valid to conclude, therefore, an ostrich can fly. This is a valid argument for purposes of logic, but the conclusion is untrue because the premise that all birds fly is incorrect. Similarly, simply addressing the conclusion regarding whether Hazrat Mirza Sahib claimed prophethood is not always sufficient without clarifying the incorrectness of the premises upon which the opposing argument is based. Another point is that there are numerous denials of a claim of prophethood in Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's writings, but for some people, such quotations are not convincing because they believe there are also quotations from his writings in which he affirms being a prophet, or at least some type of prophet. And it is this perception of Hazrat Mirza Sahib espousing conflicting positions that has caused people to view him as being, God forbid, confused, or even worse yet, purposely deceptive. So simply pointing to Hazrat Mirza Sahib's denials of prophethood without providing a basis by which those misinterpreted quotations may be understood correctly does not fully address the matter for most people. So, what we would like to do today is address 3 false assumptions or premises that often lead to the incorrect conclusion that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be a prophet. The first false assumption is that only prophets receive revelation from God, and as a result, if one claims to be a recipient of revelation, that in itself is a de facto claim of prophethood. And this topic will be addressed in a presentation by Mr. Sadruddin Saukhan. The second false assumption is that the word Nabi, or prophet in English, has only one meaning, and that whenever, regardless of the context, the word Nabi is used, it applies to a person who is a prophet in the theological sense of the word, as used in the law or Sharia of Islam. And this topic will be addressed by me. And the third false assumption is that the term Messiah can only apply to a prophet, and as a result, claiming to be the Messiah of the latter days as prophesied by Prophet Muhammad is tantamount to a claim of prophethood. And this topic will be addressed in a presentation by Dr. Naman Malik. Being cognizant of these 3 false assumptions and being able to present points to correct them is imperative to effectively address the issues that are barriers for many people to understand what Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad actually claimed. In addition, we will have a presentation that offers selections from Hazrat Mirza Sahib's writings on the Holy Prophet Muhammad, showing the status he afforded to him and the deep love he had for him. And this will be presented by Dr. Halima Said. We will also have a presentation on the great Lahore Ahmadi missionary Hafiz Sher Muhammad, whose sacrifices in the Ahmadiyya case in South Africa, through his scholarship as an expert witness, provided us a goldmine of material from which everyone, scholars and students alike, is able to present accessible information regarding Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's claims in an easy manner, and this will be presented by Mr. Ibrahim Muhammad. We will end with 2 presentations about the dual primary objectives of the Ahmadiyya movement that should never be lost sight of whenever engaging in these types of theological debates. As a reminder that the purpose of the movement is never to simply win an argument, nor should simply having the correct belief on any particular matter in and of itself satisfy the larger goal of religion or the movement. The first of these presentations will be by Dr. Muhammad Ahmad, and the second will be by Mrs. Samina Malik. And we will begin with an introductory presentation on the subject of finality of prophethood, so that we are aware of the importance of the topic being addressed and why it is so fundamental to the religion of Islam. And this presentation will be by Dr. Aisha Khan. But first, before starting the formal program, we would like to begin with a recitation of the Holy Quran, and this will be done by our dear brother from Egypt, Brother Hussein Ali, who is currently completing another doctorate degree in Islamic Studies and is joining us from Indiana.
عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أتلو ما تيسر من آيات الذكر الحكيم من سورة الرعد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات طوبى لهم وحسن مآب. The translation. Those who believe and whose hearts find rest in the remembrance of God, surely in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. Those who believe and do good, a good final state is theirs and a good return. وأتلو ما تيسر من سورة الحجرات الآية 13. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. O mankind, surely we have created you from a male and a female and made you tribes and families that you may know each other. Surely the most noble of you before God is the most dutiful of you. Surely God is knowing aware. صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you very much, Brother Hussein. Our first presentation today is titled The Significance of Finality of Prophethood and will be delivered by Dr. Aisha Khan. Dr. Aisha Khan is an emergency medicine physician at Stanford University. She is a very active member of the USA Jamaat. And if anyone has not seen her presentation from last year's annual conference, you should definitely check it out on our YouTube page. It was very well done and is really worth watching. And this introductory presentation will address the doctrine of finality of prophethood, what it actually entails, why it is important, and consequently will provide some context as to why the allegation of someone claiming to be a prophet after Prophet Muhammad is such a big deal for Muslims. So I present to you Dr. Aisha Khan.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Today we are talking about the finality, or what I like to think of as the universality of prophethood. Amongst Muslims, there's a lot of different interpretations over a lot of different issues. However, almost universally, all Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad was the last of the prophets. Why is this principle so central to the idea of being a Muslim? And how does this short verse succinctly convey to us all that is significant about the idea of a final prophet? Primarily, it's because 3 foundational truths are conveyed in this verse. The first, that he is a messenger of God, a continuation of a dispensation that has come before to other nations through their messengers. Second, that with him, the religion is complete. Nothing is to be added, for all people, for all times. And third, that through his spiritual fatherhood, his message is a universal and uniting one, the light of which will never be cut off. To adequately examine the ideas conveyed in this verse, we must first look at the idea of messengership, or prophethood. Prophets of God were not merely holy persons who received revelation from God. Rather, the real object of a prophet of God was to give his followers the guidance they need to identify, understand, and emulate the divine characteristics of God, so that we may evolve our souls to be closer to the source of those divine characteristics, to be closer to God. In the story of Adam, we are given a parable of the human condition. God tells us that human beings are given knowledge of all things. He says it in the words, we taught him the names. By the names means this ability to categorize, to study, to acquire a deep understanding of our environment, and even control and manipulate it to suit our comfort. With this ability to conquer the forces of nature, though, comes a godlike arrogance, a hubris that makes us weak. Indeed, it can make us drunk on our own abilities and a slave to the comforts and power we think we can control. Once you have that kind of comfort and that kind of power, it can be really difficult to give up. The guidance brought by a prophet to his people is a way to escape this material bondage, to strengthen our spiritual selves so that our life is spent gaining spiritual stature rather than material dominance. This guidance is brought in 2 forms. 1, the letter of the law, that is the revelation of God Almighty through the angel Gabriel. And 2, the example of the life of a prophet in implementing this revelation. Prior to the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran tells us that messengers were sent to a particular nation for a particular time. Their message was fine-tuned for the needs of their people at that time. For example, chapter 7, verse 59 of the Quran tells us Noah was sent to his people, as were Hud, Saleh, and Shuaib. The objective of Moses was to, quote, bring forth thy people from darkness to light. Jesus is spoken of as a, quote, messenger to the children of Israel. Each a specific national prophet at a time when geography limited means of travel to spread the message and effective communication was limited, and the ability to preserve and distribute the message en masse was not possible. And perhaps also the development of the human mind was such that it couldn't comprehend the things we use to divide us now, like race, nation, wealth, tribe, are only social constructs that vanish in the spiritual world, where we all have an equal opportunity to achieve greatness. As Jesus said, there is much I could tell you, but the burden would be too great for you now. However, when he comes, who is the Spirit of truth, he will guide unto all truth. Unlike the claims of the previous prophets, the Quran makes no distinction between the people for whom it was sent. Repeatedly, the Quran stresses that this is, quote, a reminder for all nations. That the Prophet is, quote, a warner to all mankind, and a messenger of God to you all, and so forth. Furthermore, his message, intended for all people, is also the seal. That is to say, a thing is sealed when there is nothing more to be added to it. It's complete, and it is intended for all times. With this prophet, the way and the guidance would be sealed. In this vein, chapter 5, verse 3 of the Quran states, "This day have I perfected for you your religion, and completed my favor to you, and chosen for you Islam as a religion." A universal prophet would have to deliver a universal message, one equally intended for all humanity. In order to not be divisive, a unifying message must acknowledge all of the true principles that are contained in the messages sent to nations before it. Within this religion are contained all the pure teachings of the prophets that have passed. As states chapter 2, verse 136, "Say, we believe in Allah and that which has been revealed to us, and in that which was revealed to Abraham, and Ishmael, and Isaac, and Jacob, and the tribes, and in that which was given to Moses, and Jesus, and in that which was given to the prophets from their Lord. We do not make any distinction between any of them, and to him do we submit." The Prophet Muhammad beautifully stated, "My likeness and the likeness of the prophets before me is the likeness of a person who built a house, and he made it complete, except for the placement of a brick in the corner. So people began to go round it and to wonder at him and say, 'Why have you not placed this brick?' So I am that brick, and I am Khatamul Nabin, the seal of the prophets." So we find that the significance of the seal of prophethood was not simply that prophethood had come to an end, but that it had reached its culmination in a state of perfection. That is, the object for which this guidance was instituted had been accomplished in its highest form. Lastly, this verse establishes the universality of the message and the oneness of humanity through the relationship of the Prophet Muhammad with his followers. The grammar in this verse is interesting because it sets up the idea of the messengership of the Prophet Muhammad as a response or a rebuttal to the idea that he does not have any biological sons. What must that mean? That though he is not the physical father of mankind, being the seal of the prophets, he is the spiritual father of mankind. Other prophets too have been called the spiritual fathers of their nations, but when a new prophet came, the people were expected to follow in the footsteps of the new prophet. But as the Prophet Muhammad is the seal, no prophet is to come after him, because in his example, we are given a universal model for all of mankind. A model that most perfectly manifests divine attributes on this earth. The life of the prophet is a unique one, allowing for a comprehensive model of life experiences. He was a laborer and a king. He was a general and a soldier, a legislator and a magistrate, a father, a husband, and a friend. In all these roles, he modeled for us the divine attributes revealed in the message. He showed his persecutors mercy, his followers beneficence and love, traitors to Islam forgiveness, justice in the defensive wars he fought, and so on. Both the message and the example of his life are recorded and available in their original form to all, even now, some 1400 years after his advent. In his example, we are given spiritual life to attain closeness to God. He is the nurturer of the part of us that is unwaveringly eternal, our soul. In following him, we are united in one mission, one goal, to manifest the divine attributes as best we can on this earth. His spiritual children will never be cut off. His light will shine equally on generation after generation. And so we come to the sum and substance of our religion, the kalima, the way in which a person professes to be a Muslim. These two basic principles establish the basis of Islam, the unity of Godhead and the finality of prophethood. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Some may object to the mention of the Prophet Muhammad's messengership with the unity of Godhead. However, what this doctrine of faith actually establishes is that with the unity of Godhead, there should be unity in the human race as well. When God perfected the faith, he taught that if the object of faith is to establish the worship of one God, one truth, the unity of the human race is essential. The first of these can be established by affirming one's faith, and for the second, affirmation of the complete and final message of the Holy Prophet is essential. Believing Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet is an entrenched principle in Islam, second probably only to the belief in the unity of God. So it is understandable why so much unrest is created among Muslims when it is alleged that someone has claimed to be a prophet after Prophet Muhammad. To truly understand such a claim, however, we must first understand what the ending of prophethood means. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Verily, messengership and prophethood have been cut off. Thus there is no messenger after me, nor prophet, but there will be mubashirat, the receiving of good news, which is one of the 46 parts of prophethood." Though there will be no new prophets appearing, new or old, after the Prophet Muhammad, it does not mean that God has stopped speaking to humans. There will be no new law, but communication with God, one of whose attributes is kalam, or speaking, will continue. This high spiritual state that people can still attain is separate from the office of prophethood. It has a precedence in both divine communication in the Quran to non-prophets, for example, to the mother of Moses when she was told to float Moses down the river, or in the example of Mary when she was given good news of Jesus. And it also has precedence in the Sufi literature, where zil, or being a shadow of the prophet, is the state of emulating the holy prophet such that God communicates with you. But it is not due to your person, but rather due to the person of the holy prophet that this communication happens, by following him, by being his shadow. These are the ways in which the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement claimed to communicate with God, as a Zili Nabi or a Baruzi Nabi. In his own words, he says, "O brethren, I have not come with a new religion or a new teaching. I am also a Muslim like you, and for us Muslims, there is no other book except the Quran which we should follow or guide others to follow." Our founder, in his own words, reiterates that he is not bringing a new law, but rather his principal objective is a return to the Quran, the reform of the religion such that for our fellow Muslims, misunderstandings, hollow rituals, and myths that have become woven into the fabric of the Islamic community are finally dispelled. and so that to non-Muslims we present the peaceful teachings of the Quran with rationality and tolerance. This is the mubasharat, the good news of which our Prophet spoke. And with that, I'll end my talk today. Thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for that excellent presentation. Our next presentation deals with the incorrect assumption that only prophets receive revelation from God. And as a result, if one claims to be a recipient of revelation, that in itself is a de facto claim of prophethood, which undermines the finality of prophethood in the Holy Prophet Muhammad. This presentation is titled Prophethood versus Prophecy, Modes of Revelation in Islam, and it will address the different types of revelation granted to man, in particular the distinction between prophetic revelation and saintly revelation. And this presentation will be given by Mr. Sadruddin Saukhan. Mr. Sadruddin Saukhan is president of the Australia Jamaat. He is recently retired from his many years of work at the prosecutor's office, and he is an honorary member of our local community here in Columbus, as he attends our annual conference every year and is known by all of our regular interfaith guests. So I present to you Mr. Saukhan.
I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that He does not have any associates or partners. And I bear witness that our Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is the servant and the messenger of Allah. He is the last prophet. He is the seal of all prophets. And there is not going to be another prophet that will come, either old or new. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The theme of the conference is the alleged claim of prophethood. In determining the effective strategies to clarify Hazrat Mirza Sahib's claims, my task is to talk on prophethood versus prophecy, which is revelation. To remove the allegation of prophethood, it becomes absolutely vital to both understand and appreciate the terms prophethood and prophecy, which is revelation. The reason why the allegation was made in the first place against Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib was because he said that God still speaks to his saintly people. The misconception arose because it was commonly understood, or I should say rather misunderstood, that God speaks to prophets only. The Arabic word for prophet is Nabi, and is literally defined as an announcement of great utility or imparting knowledge of a thing. The word is further understood as describing a person who gives information about God. The word Nabi is associated with the word Rasul, which means messenger, or literally one sent. The two words Nabi and Rasul are used interchangeably in the Holy Quran. It appears that these two words describe the two capacities of a prophet. Nabi is used to signify being a recipient of information from God, and Rasul is used to indicate being the conveyor of that message to mankind. Revelation, according to Islam, is a universal phenomenon and is very broad in its applicability. There are verses in the Holy Quran stating, revelation is granted to the earth and other inanimate objects, indicating a type of revelation through which divine laws are established for the operation of the universe. There are verses stating revelation is granted to lower life forms, including insects like a bee, implying instinct in animals is the type of revelation. Divine revelation, which is wahi, is central to the function of a prophet in the Islamic tradition. Commonly, it is presumed that prophethood and revelation are tantamount to the same thing. in that only prophets receive revelation from God. However, there are other forms of revelation also experienced by spiritual personalities who are not regarded as prophets. Concerning revelation to men, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, "It is not vouchsafed to a mortal that God should speak to him except by revelation, from behind a veil, or by sending a messenger, and revealing by his permission what he pleases." The first type of revelation is the simplest form and signifies an inspiration of an idea into the heart, distinguished from hearing actual words. This class of revelation is referred to as Wahi Kafi or inner revelation. And the second type, from behind a veil, is a higher form of revelation and includes dreams, ruya, and kasf, which is vision, and hearing actual words of inspiration, which is ilham. The third type, which is via a messenger, is the highest and the most developed form of revelation. This is the type of revelation that prophets receive through the messengership of Angel Gabriel. This class of revelation is referred to as Wahi Matlu, or revelation that is recited in words, and it what forms the basis of the revealed scriptures of the prophets. It is only this third type of revelation that is restricted to prophets. The Holy Quran demonstrates the different types of revelation to men by presenting accounts in which spiritual personalities who are not considered prophets also receiving revelation. We have the examples of Mary, the mother of Jesus, the mother of Moses, the disciples of Jesus Christ, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all, are stated to be the recipients of revelation from God. There are other examples, but I am mindful of the allocated time for this presentation. In the context of the theme of this conference, the Holy Quran specifically addresses the issue of continuity of non-prophetic revelation by stating that the awliya are given bushra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains in the Holy Quran, "Now surely the friends of God," which is awliya, "there is no fear upon them, nor do they grieve. Those who believe and guard against evil, for them are good news," which is bushra, "in this world and the hereafter." The awliya, which is the plural of wali, is a term refers to saintly figures among the Muslims who have developed a strong connection to God. The term bushra was explained by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, in this way. He said, "Nothing remains of prophethood except mubashirat," same root word as bushra. The people asked, "What is mubashirat?" He said, "True dreams." Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also explained, "The good dream, which is mubashirat, of a righteous believer is one of the 46th parts of prophethood." Revelation in the form of a good or true dreams received by saints, therefore, is considered part of prophethood. Since it is only one of the many aspects of prophethood, its continuity does not undermine in any shape or form the complete or actual prophethood that ended with our Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Imam Raghib, he explained, and I quote, "The Messenger of Allah is reported to have said that revelation has been cut off and nothing remains except mubashirat, which are true visions a believer sees or is shown to him." Similarly, Fakhr ad-Din al-Razi said in his tafsir of the Holy Quran, he said, "The Holy Prophet is reported to have said that bushra is a true vision which a believer sees or which is shown to him, and it is also reported from the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, that prophethood has gone, but mubashirat remains." Our Holy Prophet Muhammad further explained that revelation in the form of words of inspiration from God to saintly figures, saintly persons, is also a part of prophethood. And he continues, "Among the nations before you, there used to be muhaddatun, and if there is one of them in my nation, it is Umar." He further clarified who the Muhaddithun are by defining the term in the most identical report from the same source by replacing Muhaddithun with the description. And he said, among the Israelite people before you, there used to be men who were spoken to by God, although they were not prophets. If there is such a one among my followers, it is Umar. A Muhaddith, therefore, is a person who is spoken to by God, but is not a prophet. Consequently, the term Wali and the term Muhaddith in the Hadith signify the same thing. A saintly person who receives non-prophetic revelation. In the famous commentary of the Holy Quran, Ruh al-Ma'ani, he explained, and he said, in this verse, which is 42, verse 51, in this verse, God has referred to people in general and not prophets as such, because revelation is not confined to prophets. In previous times, there is the example of Mary, the mother of Moses, who were not prophets, but God spoke to them. In our religion, there will be the position of Muhaddithun of the nation. They will receive revelation. Similarly, a popular commentary on the Bukhari says, by Muhaddith are meant persons to whom God speaks without them being prophets. Now, the classic Muslim theologians like Sheikh Ahmad of Syrian wrote, know, O truthful brother, that the speaking of God with men is sometimes face to face. This is for the prophets and is also for some of the perfect followers due to obedience and as inheritance. When a follower receives divine speech abundantly and frequently in this manner, he is called a Muhaddith, as was Umar, the chief of the Muslims. Likewise, Shah Waliullah of Delhi, he wrote, the rank of Muhaddith is such that when a Muhaddith arises, he does not have to follow conclusions derived by human reasoning, such as the sun eliminates the need for ordinary lamps, for he comes with revelation and the knowledge given to prophets. This principle of continuity of non-prophetic revelation to saintly personalities is explained in renowned traditional commentaries of the Holy Quran and Hadith, and is a prominent theme in the writings of classical Muslim theologians. For example, Al-Ghazali, he said, know that the men of the heart are shown the secrets of the worlds through inspiration into the mind, or through true dreams, or through visions whilst awake. This is one of the highest grades of the degrees of prophethood, as a true dream is one of the 46 parts of prophethood. So be aware of denying this knowledge through lack of understanding. Abdul Qadir Jilani, similarly, he explained, woe unto you, O innovator! God does not have the power to say, I am God. With our God, great is His glory. He is a speaker and not dumb. His word is heard and understood. Ibn Arabi, he explained, it is impossible that revelation from God can stop. For if it were to be cut off, there would not remain for the world any spiritual food by which it continues to subsist. Similar sentiments have been are found in the writings of Jalal Abdul Rumi, Sheikh Ahmad of Syrian, Imam Shirani, Shah Waliullah of Delhi, Imam Zafar Sadiq, and many others. The points outlined above establish three important principles. One is that the Holy Quran identifies spiritual personalities that received revelation but were not prophets. These spiritual personalities received the first two classes of revelation, that is, non-prophetic revelation. These two classes of revelation continue among saintly personalities and does not end. As a result, only that one form of revelation that is granted to prophets, which is communicated through Angel Gabriel and which forms the basis of revealed scripture, is what has discontinued with our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If prophethood has ended, a prophetic revelation is no longer possible. But the other two forms of revelation, the types that are available to saintly personalities who are not prophets remains. Having established this background, attention may be directed to the views of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib. Consistent with his belief in the finality of prophethood in Prophet Muhammad, Mirza Sahib maintained that the prophetic revelation, Wahi Nabuwat or Wahi Risalat, that form of revelation that is transmitted via the agency of Angel Gabriel, has ended. And I quote him, "It is obvious that if it is supposed that the Angel Gabriel can now descend even with one sentence of prophetic revelation, which is Wahi Nabuwat, and remain silent thereafter, this would still contradict the finality of prophethood. For when the seal of finality is breached and revelation granted to messengers, Wahi Risalat, again starts to descend, it matters not whether the amount is little or much." Unquote. And again he said, and I quote, "Every wise person can understand that if God is true to his promise, and the promise given in the seal of the prophet verse, which has been explicitly mentioned in the hadith, that now, after the death of Prophet of God, peace and blessings of God be upon him, Gabriel has been forbidden forever from bringing prophetic revelation, which is Wahi Nabuwat. If all these things are true and correct, then no person can at all appear as a messenger, Rasul, after our holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him." Similar examples of Mirza Sahib's belief in the termination of prophetic revelation are as follows, and I quote, "A seal has been put upon prophetic revelation, Wahi Nabuwat, since 1300 years ago," and that was at the time when he made that particular statement. Further he said, quote, "It has just been shown that revelation granted to a messenger, Wahi Risalat, has been terminated till the day of judgment." In addition, he asked a rhetorical question. And he asked, how could it be permitted that despite the fact that our Holy Prophet Muhammad is the last of the prophets, seal of the prophets, some other prophet should appear sometime and prophetic revelation commence? Moreover, in harmony with the classical independent Muslim theological views, Mirza Sahib also explains that a type of revelation, that part of prophethood granted to saints, however, remains. The Messenger of Allah is reported to have said that there is nothing left of prophethood except good news, mubashir. That is to say, from the parts of prophethood, only one part remains, namely mubashirat, which comprises true dreams, genuine and true visions, and revelation, which descends on the chosen ones from among the saints. Mirza Sahib further explains the distinctive nature of prophetic revelation in the following way. He says the hadith proves that perfect prophethood, Hakiki Nabuwat, which contained the revelation of the law, Sharia, has certainly been cut off. But prophethood, which contains nothing except mubashirat, good news, shall exist until the day of resurrection and shall never cease. As you know and have read in the books of hadith, true visions are a 46th part of perfect prophethood. By contrasting prophetic revelation with saintly revelation in this manner, Mirza Sahib distinguishes the two not only in form but also in content. In form, only prophetic revelation is transmitted via the agency of Angel Gabriel. In content, only prophetic revelation contains laws. This distinction of only prophetic revelation containing laws is again in uniformity with the understanding of independent classical Muslim theologians. Ibn Arabi, for example, he wrote extensively on the subject of the relationship between prophethood and sainthood, and he too identified revelation containing laws, Sharia, as the distinguishing criteria. He said, quote, "All the forms of revelation we have explained here are to be found in men of God from among the saints. The revelation that was exclusive to the prophet and not for the saint is the revelation containing the laws, Sharia." Others like Imam Abdul Wahab Shirani, he said, quote, "The door of prophethood is closed after the Holy Prophet Muhammad and shall not be opened for anyone until the day of judgment. However, revelation which does not contain laws, which is Sharia, in it remains for the saints." Mirza Sahib distinguished the two grades of revelation in his writings by classifying as Wahi Nabuwat, which is prophetic revelation, and Wahi Wilayat, which is saintly revelation. Consequently, a determination of how Mirza Sahib described the revelations he received as indicative of whether he considered himself as a prophet in the theological sense. If he claimed to be a prophet in the theological sense, which is Nabi or Rasul, as opposed to a saint, which is Wahi, Wali or Muhaddad, he should refer to his revelations as Wahi Nabuwat. Consistent with his conviction in the finality of prophethood in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and belief in prophetic revelation having ended, he refers to the revelations he received as Wahi Wilayat and not Wahi Nabuwat. He said, I believe that it is not Wahi Nabuwat, prophetic revelation, but Wahi Wilayat, saintly or revelation, that the saints received through the prophethood of Muhammad due to their perfect following of him. If anyone accuses me of claiming anything beyond this, he departs from honesty and fear of God. I have noticed that at the time of revelation, which descends upon me in the form of Wahi Wilayat, saintly revelation, I feel myself in the hands of an extremely strong external force. So to summarize, revelation in Islam is a universal phenomenon, very broad in its scope, and is granted to inanimate objects, lower life forms, and to humans. With regard to humans, there are three forms of revelation. The first type is that of the inner revelation and consists of an inspiration of an idea into the heart. The second type is a higher form of revelation that includes dreams, visions, and hearing actual words of inspiration. And the third type is the most developed form of revelation and entails receiving a revelation through the messengership of Angel Gabriel. Only the third type of revelation through the messengership of Angel Gabriel is restricted to prophets. The first two types of revelation are also granted to people who are not prophets. The Holy Quran and authentic Hadith explain that revelation to saintly persons continue in the form of mubashirat, which is good news. The respected saintly Muslim personalities of the classical period have further clarified that Wahi Nabuwat, which is prophetic revelation, which contains laws and is delivered by the angel Gabriel, has terminated with our Holy Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. But the Wahi Wilayat, which is saintly revelation, does not contain laws and is not delivered via angel Gabriel, but nonetheless is communication from Almighty Allah, remains for those who have developed a close relationship with God. Mirza Sahib, consistent with these established principles, argued that Wahi Nabuwat, prophetic revelation, has ended with the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that the revelation he receives is only Wahi Wilayat, which is saintly revelation. I hope this information will help address the false assumptions that many people have concerning revelation, and will help remove an obstacle in the way of people understanding Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib's true claims. Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sadruddin Saukhan. That was very well presented. The next presentation deals with the incorrect assumption that the word Nabi, prophet in English, has only one meaning, and that whenever the term is used in whatever context, it is understood in the theological sense, meaning in accordance with how the term is defined per Islamic religious doctrine, or how the term is used pursuant to the terminology of Islamic law. And I will be presenting on this topic. For those who may not know me, I am an attorney by way of profession. I primarily practice civil rights law in the employment context, and I am the secretary of the U.S. Jamaat. So, to get started, The underlying issue that will be addressed in this presentation is that simply presenting quotes from Hazrat Mirza Sahib's writings in which he denies claiming prophethood is normally insufficient to convince an opposing party that Hazrat Mirza Sahib did not claim to be a prophet. And this is because opponents are usually familiar with other quotes from Hazrat Mirza Sahib's writings in which he does attribute the word prophet or the related word messenger to himself. For instance, in his book, Ek Galti Ka Izala, Hazrat Mirza Sahib states very forcefully, "I have never denied being called a prophet in this sense." So opponents argue that even though Hazrat Mirza Sahib denied claiming prophethood in some instances, he did at least claim prophethood or some form of it in others. And the implication for them is that Hazrat Mirza Sahib, God forbid, was either confused about his own status, and that is why there are these seemingly conflicting views presented in his writings, or that even worse, he was intentionally being deceptive, claiming prophethood when it suited his purpose and denying it when the circumstances did not benefit him. The issue of how to respond to the allegation that Hazrat Mirza Sahib claimed prophethood is what prompted him to write the booklet Ek Galti Ka Izala, or in English, a correction of an error. And he explains in the opening words of that book that despite good intentions, simply denying the use of the word prophet being attributed to him in his writings is incorrect. I'll read to you the opening two paragraphs from Ek Galti Ka Izala. Hazrat Mirza Sahib writes, "Some people in our movement who are not well acquainted with my claim and the arguments relating to it, not having had the occasion to study my books carefully, nor having stayed in my company for a sufficient length of time to complete their knowledge, in some instances, in response to an objection of the opponents, give a reply which is entirely against facts. So despite being on the side of truth, they have to face embarrassment. Thus it happened a few days ago that a person faced from an opponent the objection that the man whose pledge you have taken claims to be a prophet and a messenger. This was answered by only a denial, while such an answer is not correct. The fact is that the holy revelation of God Almighty, which descends upon me, contains words such as Rasul, Mursal, and Nabi, not once but hundreds of times. So how can the reply be correct that such words are not present?" So Hazrat Mirza Sahib explains that although being on the side of truth, by arguing that he did not claim prophethood, a more detailed response is required to satisfactorily address the allegation being made. And the remainder of the book is devoted by Hazrat Mirza Sahib to summarize what he had explained in his previous books about the different meanings of the word prophet and its acceptable uses. Now, anyone who has ever used a dictionary knows that every word has multiple meanings or significances or connotations. This is not some novel concept. And so the same goes for the word prophet. The word prophet has multiple meanings and may be used in different ways. If you review all of Hazrat Mirza Sahib's writings, you will find that he uses the word prophet in three distinct ways. One, in a theological manner, in accordance with Islamic religious doctrine. Two, in a metaphorical style, as employed in Sufi literature. And 3, in a literal sense, to convey the lexiconic meaning of the word. Simply keeping these 3 meanings in mind when reading the word prophet in Hazrat Mirza Sahib's writings reveals there is no contradiction at all. Whenever he denies claiming prophethood, it is in the context of the word being used in accordance with Islamic religious doctrine. And whenever he attributes the word to himself, it is in the context of when the metaphorical sense of the word is used, as is commonly employed in Sufi discourse, or when the literal sense of the word is being utilized to convey its lexiconic meaning. So Hazrat Mirza Sahib was consistent in holding that the word prophet cannot be applied to anyone after the Holy Prophet Muhammad when the term is understood in accordance with Islamic theology, or what Hazrat Mirza Sahib refers to as according to the terminology of Islam. And that is because the Holy Prophet is the Khatam al-Nabiyyin. Notwithstanding, he consistently clarifies that the word prophet may be used in a metaphorical sense, or according to its literal significance, which is different from the meaning in Islamic theology, and therefore does not in any way undermine the belief in finality of prophethood in Prophet Muhammad. I'd like to now provide some perspective, albeit briefly, on how it was perfectly acceptable for Hazrat Mirza Sahib to have used the word prophet in reference to himself in both a metaphorical sense and according to its literal meaning. In order to appreciate the metaphorical use of the word prophet by Hazrat Mirza Sahib, one must understand the concept of muhaddathiyya, the spiritual position that Hazrat Mirza Sahib claimed for himself was that of a muhaddath. And he would particularly emphasize this status when denying any claim to prophethood, thereby making a clear distinction between the two. For instance, he wrote, "I firmly believe that our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, is the Khatam al-Anbiya, the seal of the prophets. And after him no prophet, neither old nor new, shall appear for this ummah. Of course, muhaddathun, saints, will come who will be spoken to by God and possess some attributes of full prophethood by way of reflection, and in some ways be colored with the color of prophethood. I am one of these." By definition, a muhaddath is not a prophet as the word is understood according to Islamic religious doctrine. A muhaddath is defined as one with whom God speaks, but who is not a prophet. Aside from the type of revelation granted to prophets and muhaddathun being different, as was explained in the previous presentation, muhaddathun are dependent on following a prophet in order to attain their high spiritual state. Hazrat Mirza Sahib explained this by stating, "God bestowed the honor of his full, perfect, pure, and holy communication and revelation to some such persons who reached the stage of fana fir rasul to the highest degree, so that there remained no separation. The concept of ummati, being a follower, and the meaning of following was found in them to completion and perfection, so that their very being did not remain their own selves, but rather the person of the Holy Prophet Muhammad was reflected in the mirror of their state of engrossment. On the other hand, they received divine communication and revelation in the fullest and most perfect sense, like prophets, So in this sense, some persons, despite being ummati, followers, receive the title of Nabi or prophet. And it is because of this concept of fana fir rasul that the term prophet can be applied to muhaddathun in a metaphorical manner. Hazrat Mirza Sahib explained this concept, which is common in Sufi discourse, by expounding on how prophets personify the display of divine attributes on earth, and how by following a prophet's example perfectly, one may attain this level of nearness to the divine. This form of discipleship entails losing one's own identity to the extent of merging with the personality of the prophet. And it is in this sense, when one reaches this spiritual stage of becoming one with the prophet, in a spiritual sense, that the title Nabi or prophet can be attributed to such a person in a metaphorical manner. As Hazrat Mirza Sahib further clarifies, he writes, the fact that our holy prophet is the Khatam an-Nabiyyin prohibits the coming of any other prophet. However, a prophet who obtains light from the lamp of the prophethood of Muhammad, who in other words is also called a muhaddath, is exempt from this restriction, because due to his obedience to the Holy Prophet and due to his being Fanafir Rasul, he is included within the person of the last of the messengers, just as a part is included in the whole. This metaphorical use of the term prophet is also exemplified by the qualified and conditional terms used when attributed to a muhaddath. In addition to referring to it as metaphorical prophethood, Hazrat Mirza Sahib also refers to it as partial or imperfect prophethood, as opposed to real or full or perfect prophethood when referring to the word's meaning according to Islamic theology. Similarly, the terms buruz, meaning manifestation, or zil, meaning reflection, are also used to describe the metaphorical prophethood attained by a muhaddath due to achieving the state of fana fir rasul. But if one is unaware of these spiritual concepts and the metaphorical language that is used in the Sufi tradition to describe them, it will be difficult for him or her to appreciate how the term prophet may be applied to a saintly person who is not a real prophet. As Hazrat Mirza Sahib explained, the fact is that when spiritual and heavenly concepts are made public, people have difficulty comprehending them. Eventually, they distort them somewhat and take metaphor to be reality, thus resulting in serious error and misguidance. Now, in addition to the metaphorical use of the word prophet, Hazrat Mirza Sahib explains that the term can also be applied to a muhaddath according to its literal meaning. And in particular, Hazrat Mirza Sahib explains that it is in this literal sense of the word prophet that the word prophet appears in the revelation he receives from Almighty Allah, not in the sense of the word's meaning according to religious doctrine. He writes, however, being an appointed one of God, Ma'mur, I dare not conceal the word prophethood and messengership that occur frequently in the communications I receive from God Almighty. But I declare repeatedly in such revelations the words Mursal, Rasul, or Nabi that occur are not to be taken in their real sense. The real sense referenced by Hazrat Mirza Sahib is the Islamic theological sense. Hazrat Mirza Sahib further explained that the words prophet and messenger included in his revelations were only meant to describe the functions in the descriptive sense of the words. He writes, "There are many such revelations in which the word Nabi or Rasul has occurred regarding me. However, the person is mistaken who thinks that by this prophethood and messengership is meant real prophethood and messengership. In fact, by the word Rasul is only meant one sent by God, and by the word Nabi is only meant one who makes prophecies having received intimation from God, or one who discloses hidden matters. However, in the terminology of Islam, Nabi and Rasul mean those who bring an entirely new Sharia, or those who abrogate some aspects of the previous Sharia, or those who are not called followers of a previous prophet, having a direct connection with God without the benefit from a prophet. Therefore, one should be vigilant to see that the same meaning is not taken here." So, Hazrat Mirza Sahib makes clear here that the words prophet and messenger in Islamic theology having a distinct meaning, distinguishable from the broad etymological applicability of the words. In the literal sense, for purposes of describing the function of one who is sent and one who expounds hidden truths through knowledge from God, the words Rasul and Nabi categorically apply to a muhaddath. The literal meaning of the word muhaddath is different and simply does not describe these two functions. As Hazrat Mirza Sahib stated, if one who receives news of the unseen from God is not to be called Nabi, tell us, what should he be called? If it is said that he should be called muhaddath, I say that in no lexicon is the meaning tadis, root word of muhaddath, making known the unseen. So, to wrap up this short presentation, in order to fully address the issue of whether Hazrat Mirza Sahib claimed to be a prophet, it is necessary to acknowledge that the three different ways in which Hazrat Mirza Sahib used the word prophet in his writings. Simply providing his denials of claiming prophethood does not resolve the underlying basis upon which opponents advance their arguments. In order to provide a satisfactory response, as Hazrat Mirza Sahib indicates in the opening words of Ek Galti Ka Izala, the conversation should entail pointing out that Hazrat Mirza Sahib uses the term prophet in three ways. When he denied attributing the word to himself, it was in the sense of the theological meaning of the word prophet. And whenever he attributed the word to himself, it was only in the metaphorical sense or in the literal sense, the two ways that it is perfectly appropriate to apply to a muhaddath. So, I'll end my presentation here and thank you for listening. Our next presentation concerns another incorrect assumption, and that is that the term Messiah can only be applied to a prophet. This presentation is titled Mujaddid, Messiah, and Mahdi, titles depicting the work of reform, and addresses Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's primary claim of being the Mujaddid of the 14th century Hijra, and how the terms Messiah and Mahdi relate to this primary claim. Our presenter on this topic is Dr. Nouman Malik. Dr. Malik is a retired pathologist and on the board of directors for the U.S. Jamaat, but since his retirement from practicing medicine, his workload seems to have quadrupled due to the multitude of Jamaat activities which he and Mrs. Samina Malik shoulder on a daily basis. So I present to you Dr. Nouman Malik.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you Fazil for that nice introduction you gave me. The title of my lecture is Mujaddid, Messiah and Mahdi, titles depicting the work of reform. These are the three titles which are associated with Hazrat Mirza Sahib's name. The intent of my lecture is to correct the false assumption that many people hold concerning the promised Messiah necessarily being a prophet. That is, if Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be the Messiah, that is tantamount to a claim of prophethood. Although classifying himself among the hundreds of awliya and muhaddisun, as explained by previous speakers, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad does make a distinction for himself. He claimed to be the Mujaddid, reformer of the 14th century of the Islamic calendar, which period corresponds approximately to the 19th century. He further stated that the Mujaddid of this century was given the titles Promised Messiah and Mahdi, which were descriptive of the mission entrusted to him. The claims of being Mujaddid and Mahdi were not used by his opponents to attribute a claim of prophethood to him, as there was a long-standing tradition of saintly persons claiming to be Mujaddids, and the Mahdi was always expected to be a person from among the Ummah of the Muslims. But many interpreted Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's claim of being the promised Messiah as a de facto claim of prophethood. Since Jesus the Messiah was a prophet according to the Quran, it was argued that claiming to be the return of Jesus must necessarily entail a claim of a similar status, especially since the Hadith report that mentions the second coming of Jesus refers to the coming of the Messiah as a prophet Nabi. It is noteworthy that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad only used the word claim, dawa, when proclaiming to be the Mujaddid of the era, the promised Messiah and the awaited Mahdi. Whenever he used the word prophet in reference to himself, it was always in a descriptive manner, never by the way of announcing some type of claim. To understand the significance of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claiming to be the Messiah, one must first understand what a Mujaddid is. A Mujaddid is a reformer and is given the mission of correcting certain things that are an obstacle to the progress of Islam and to achieving closeness to God. The concept of a Mujaddid is based on the universally accepted hadith in the Abu Dawud, which states, Inna Allaha yabathu lihazihil ummati ala rasi kulli miyati sanatin. Allah will raise for this community at the head of every century one who shall revive for it its faith. With the advent of Islam, Allah the Most High sent the Holy Quran, the last revealed book which will provide guidance in any age or society, and the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, the final prophet, after whom there will be no prophet, as he has brought prophethood to perfection, a distinction which also makes him the perfect exemplar. It is Allah the Most High's promise that he will guard the Holy Quran from any change or interpolation. So, although no change occurs in the text of the Quran, with the passage of time, however, interpretations of the Quranic verses or hadiths which run counter to the teachings of the Quran and hadiths may be introduced in the practice of Islam. To correct this situation, Islam has introduced the system of mujaddids. The appointment of a mujaddid in the hadiths indicates the raising of a particular person who has been gifted with divine inspiration and communication, that is, saintly revelation, in other words, a muhaddis, for the specific purpose of removing any errors which may have crept into the faith and pose a danger to Islam. The Mujaddid does not make changes in the Quran or Hadith, he simply removes the misconceptions. Throughout the Islamic centuries, people have made a claim of being a Mujaddid. Prominent examples of Mujaddids are Imam Ghazali of the 5th century, Abdul Qadir Jilani of the 6th century, and Moinuddin Chishti of the 7th century Hijra, etc. It is in accordance with this concept that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be the Mujaddid of the 14th century Hijrah, that is the late 19th century. The fact of his being raised as Mujaddid is the spread of the true essence of Islam in the world. He writes, the spiritual triumph of the religion of Islam, which would be brought about by conclusive arguments and shining proofs, is destined to be accomplished through this weak mortal. Its conquest over different sects and nations, depending on the coming of a time, which by opening the ways of communication would turn the whole world into a kind of a United States. Thus, God intends, by giving me knowledge of hundreds of sure arguments, to spread and propagate the knowledge of the true teachings of Islam among all the nations and all countries. Braheen Ahmadiyya, pages 498 to 502. When he announced that he had been appointed as Mujaddid, he was already successfully defending Islam and showing the rational, beautiful principles of the faith. He was acknowledged by nearly all the ulama of that time as being the Mujaddid of the age. As the Mujaddid of the 14th century of the Islamic calendar, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad had a twofold mission. One was to defend the attacks on Islam by the dominant Christian faith, and the other was to correct beliefs among Muslims themselves that impeded the understanding of the spirituality of the faith. Several years after he had claimed that he was Mujaddid of the age, God revealed to him that the original Jesus Christ was dead, and he, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, was the promised Messiah. That the original Jesus had not died on the cross, but had been taken down while in a swoon appearing to be dead. That after reviving, he traveled to India where he preached to the Kashmiris and the Pathans, who were the descendants of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. He died in Kashmir at the age of 120 years, and Jesus' grave is located in Srinagar. In the great dictionaries of the Arabic language, Lisan al-Arab and Qamus, the Messiah is one who has been touched, that's the word mas, with good. And that is, good and blessing have been placed in his nature, so much so that his very touch gives blessings. This title was given to Jesus and is given by God to whom he pleases. That's in Hazrat Mirza Sahib's book, the Masih Hindustan mein, page 71. Saintly personages like Waliullahs before Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad had claimed to be the messiahs on this basis. Mirza Sahib himself explains why the 14th century Mujaddid was given the title of promised Messiah. The Messiah foretold in the hadith of the Prophet and therefore promised. He writes, God has sent me in the likeness and with the qualities of Jesus in order to remove the Jewishness, that is the Pharisaical attitude and behavior of Muslims of the latter days. Hence, I am the promised son of Mary in a metaphorical sense, who had been promised to appear at the time of Jewishness and supremacy of Christianity. I have come devoid of material means, with spiritual power and weaponry, as opposed to the wrong conception of physical warfare that prevailed among Muslims about the second coming of Christ. My war is spiritual and my kingdom is not of this world. I have nothing to do with the battles and offensives of the world. My life is one of humility and meekness like that of Jesus. I have come to re-establish humility, meekness, righteousness, civility, and inner purity in Muslims, and to teach the path of high morals. If Muslims do not accept me, I shall not be grieved at all, because before me the Israelites did not accept Jesus. He again writes in Kashful Gita, page 12, the name promised Messiah, which has been given to me from heaven, means nothing more than that God has made me to follow the example of Jesus in terms of moral conditions, so that I may breathe spiritual life into people by peace and gentleness. In reply to the accusation that by claiming to be promised Messiah after he had been appointed as Mujaddid, he was claiming to be a prophet. He repeatedly denied that he was claiming to be a prophet, but that his claim was that of a muhaddas, that is a non-prophet who receives saintly but not prophetic revelation. He writes in Tawzi Moram, pages 9 and 10, here if it be objected that the like of the Messiah should be a prophet because the Messiah was himself a prophet, the reply to this is in the first instance that our holy prophet has not made prophethood a condition for the coming Messiah, but has clearly stated that he shall be a Muslim and bound by the laws of the Quran like ordinary Muslims. He shall not say anything except that he was Muslim and their leader. Besides this, there is no doubt in it that this humble servant has been raised by the Most High God for this nation in the capacity of a muhaddis. And again he writes, I believe in all these things that are recorded in the Holy Quran and authentic Hadith. I do not claim to be Jesus, the son of Mary, nor do I believe in reincarnation. I only claim to be the like of the Messiah. In the same way as sainthood in Islam, or the muhaddisiyat, bears a resemblance to prophethood, my spiritual condition bears a similarity of the highest degree to the spiritual condition of Jesus. I am a Muslim. I have come from the Lord of the heavens and the earth as a reformer, mujaddid of the religion for the 14th century, having the characteristics and disposition of Jesus. People often interpret his claim of being promised Messiah as making a claim that somehow is greater than that of being mujaddid. This assumption has been refuted by Hazrat Mirza Sahib himself in his book Aina Kamalat Islam. He states, and this must be remembered, that the claim of being the promised Messiah is not in any way greater than the claim of being a recipient of divine communication, mulham min Allah, or a mujaddid from God. This interpretation of the hadith of the descent of Jesus by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as meaning that a follower of Islam, a servant, that is a ghulam of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Ahmad, was the promised Messiah and not the Prophet Jesus who had died 2000 years ago like all prophets. This had far-reaching effects. It completely negated the arguments that the Christian missionaries were using to great effect in trying to convert Muslims to Christianity. Jesus Christ, from a godlike figure seated in heaven, who would come down to save the Muslims whose own prophet was dead and buried in Medina, became just another prophet who had died and could not be Son of God. Jesus' fainting and not dying on the cross and his subsequent migration to Kashmir, where he died a peaceful death, completely does away with the theory of atonement of sins. This is what is meant by the breaking of the cross by the promised Messiah. The killing of the swine in the world means getting rid of swinish habits and low morality in people. And the killing of the Dajjal or Antichrist means the ending of the materialistic view of human existence advanced by Western Christian civilization. And he did this by firmly establishing, with arguments and proofs, the existence of a living God. And also the one additional task of the Messiah was supposed to be the ending of war or jizya. And what it means is that by spreading the peaceful coexisting principles of Islam, wars would come to an end. The end result is that these obstacles for the introduction and acceptance of Islam in Christian countries and in other non-Muslim countries are removed. At about the same time, he was informed by Allah Ta'ala that he was the promised Messiah. He was also informed that he was the long-awaited Mahdi who would appear at the time of the promised Messiah, thus attesting to the truth of the prophetic hadith in Ibn Majah, one of the books of hadith, the correct books of hadith, that there is no Mahdi but Isa. The word Mahdi is defined as follows. Mahdi is a title given to the Holy Prophet Muhammad, meaning rightly guided by instinct, heir to all guidance, and the full reflection of the divine attribute guide. A muhaddis also receives this title of Mahdi when, by his perfect following of the Holy Prophet, he becomes his zil or reflection. While discussing the hadith of Mahdi, Hazrat Mirza Sahib writes those hadiths which are authentic indicate and even state clearly that he shall not have a worldly kingship and rule, nor would he fight or shed blood or have an army, but that he would re-establish faith in the hearts by spirituality and power of the heart. As in the Hadith, there is no Mahdi except Jesus, recorded in the Hadith book of Ibn Majah. This Hadith means that no Mahdi shall come except the man who shall come with the temperament and disposition of Jesus. That is, he shall be the promised Messiah as well as the Mahdi. He shall come with the temperament of Jesus, following his technique of teaching. That is, he shall not return evil for evil, nor shall he fight. Rather, he shall spread guidance by means of pure example and heavenly signs. His teaching shall be, do not fight for the faith, but spread it by the means of the light of truth and the miracles of good morals. Haqiqat al-Mahdi, pages 1 to 3. The popular concept of the Mahdi among the Muslims was that of a warlike leader who would conquer city after city from east to west and offer the alternatives of death by sword or conversion to Islam. By the metaphorical interpretation of the conquest of Mahdi, the Mahdi himself, that is Hazrat Mirza Sahib, removes the greatest obstacle for people to accept Islam, as they would now not consider Islam to be a violent and a cruel faith. Another great service that Hazrat Mirza Sahib did by claiming to be the promised Messiah was that he safeguarded the honor and status of the Holy Prophet, and more importantly, the finality of prophethood of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. The descent of the original Jesus Christ and his saving Islam was an insult to the being of the Holy Prophet, as it implied that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, could not bring about the victory of Islam, but needed another prophet to accomplish that task. But if Hazrat Mirza Sahib, as a Mujaddid, is the promised Messiah, then any spiritual conquests are not his, because he can only attain to the state of Mujaddid by faithfully following the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, thereby becoming Fana fi Rasul, annihilated in the Prophet. So any spiritual excellences or achievements he has are due to the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. In this way, the victory is that of the Holy Prophet, and the Holy Prophet is deserving of the verse, he it is who is sent his messenger with the guidance and religion of truth, that he may make it prevail over all religions. Holy Quran, chapter 9, verse 33. Along the same lines, Hazrat Mirza Sahib argues the point that if the original Jesus, upon whom be peace, were to return to earth, he would receive prophetic revelation, and that would definitely breach the prophethood of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. He writes in his book Anjam-e-Atham, footnote, pages 27 to 28, the title Prophet of God for the promised Messiah found in Sahih Muslim, etc., from the blessed tongue of the Holy Prophet is meant in the same metaphorical way or sense as it occurs in Sufi literature as an accepted and common term for a recipient of divine communication. Otherwise, how can there be a prophet after the Khatamul Anbiya? And again in Zail-i-Aham, page 585, he argues the point, if the same Messiah, the messenger of Allah and the possessor of a book, Sahib-e-Kitab, on whom Gabriel used to descend, would reappear, then he would never be a student of anyone from learning the laws of the Sharia of Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. But as is the practice of God, divine revelation would descend on him through Gabriel, and all the laws and commandments of the Sharia of Muhammad, peace be upon him, would be revealed to him afresh in a new way, new shape, and a new language. And as compared to this new book, which would be revealed from heaven, the Quran would be abrogated. Hazrat Mirza Sahib's identification with the promised Messiah removes this great danger to the finality of prophethood. So these interpretations of Mujaddid, Messiah, and Mahdi, as exemplified by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, are powerful reformatory concepts for the correct understanding and appreciation of the original Islam as a religion of peace and reconciliation, and of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, as a man of peace, love, and justice. This reformatory work can only be done by a mujaddid, as prophets may not appear after the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and the titles Messiah and Mahdi simply describe the two different functions of the work of this particular mujaddid. I will end my talk here. Thank you for listening, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malik, for that excellent presentation. Our next presentation is titled The Servant of Ahmad, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's Love for the Holy Prophet. And as the title suggests, this presentation will be based on Hazrat Mirza Sahib's words about the Holy Prophet. Presenting Hazrat Mirza Sahib's beliefs about the Holy Prophet actually rebuts another false assumption that many Muslims hold, and that is that by making certain claims about himself, that Hazrat Mirza Sahib, God forbid, was either purposefully or by implication undermining the status of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. So this presentation will be, which will be given by Dr. Halima Said, also provides very valuable information for purposes of another point to be cognizant of when discussing the issue of Hazrat Mirza Sahib's claims with others. Dr. Halima Said is a pediatrician by profession and a very active member of the Jamaat in Lahore, Pakistan. We were very fortunate to have her and her husband Asad Ahmad in Ohio with us for several years while they both worked in Cleveland. But we all appreciate that they're doing very valuable work in Pakistan, both for the Jamaat and for humanity. So present to you Dr. Halima Said.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Halima from Lahore, Pakistan, and I've been asked today to share my thoughts about Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's love for the Holy Prophet Muhammad. In his own words, "Wo peshwa hamara jisse hai noor sara, namus ka hai Muhammad, dilbar mera yahi hai." He is our guide and leader, the source of guiding light. His name is Muhammad. He is the dearest to my heart. So this is an interesting topic for me to talk about and share whatever information I've been able to gather with you guys, because it's a very controversial topic, because you have two sort of extremes of views about Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's relationship with the Holy Prophet Muhammad. On the one end, you have his followers who say that he was Fanaf-e Rasul. His whole life was an embodiment of the Prophet Muhammad's love. And on the other hand, you have people that oppose him and that say that he falsely claimed to be a prophet and totally misunderstand and misrepresent what he claimed to be. So you have sort of like two very extreme points of views on his love for the Prophet Muhammad. So let's start by looking at what Fanaf-e Rasul is. Fanaf-e Rasul means to produce the qualities of the Holy Prophet within oneself. Now, this is not like a really new thing or a new concept that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad introduced. It's been something that's always been claimed by saints and Sufis and religious leaders throughout the history of Islam. For example, Khwaja Ziaullah Naqshbandi in his book says, the rank of Fanaf-e Rasul is attained when all the characteristics and qualities of the Holy Prophet are to be found in one, and all of one's deeds, movements, habits, devotions, and meditations are exactly according to the manner of the Holy Prophet. And this is not a concept that died with time. Actually, even if you look at current Sufi literature, this is a terminology that is still very much in use. Let's see how Hazrat Saab himself explained this. In Aina Kamalat Islam, he says, at the end of every century, especially a century in which people have departed from faith and honesty, and one which is full of darkness, God raises someone who is a substitute for a prophet and whose nature reflects the image of the prophet. That substitute prophet shows people through his own beings the qualities of the prophet whom he obeys. So this is what he claimed to be. In his poetry, he says, "Us noor par fida hoon, uska hi main hua hoon. वो है मैं चीज क्या हूँ बस फैसला यही है." I am passionately in love with that spiritual light and I have given myself to him. He, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is of the essence and I am not, and this is final. In his Urdu writings, he says in his book Haqiqatul Wahi, I'm only going to read the Urdu. The English is there for you guys as a summary to summarize what he has said in Urdu. He says, हम क्या चीज़ हैं और हमारी हकीकत क्या है? हम काफिर नेमत होंगे अगर इस बात का इकरार ना करें कि तौहीद हकीकी हमने इस नबी के जरिए से पाई और जिंदा खुदा की शनाख्त हम इस कामिल नबी के जरिए से और इसके नूर से मिली है और खुदा के मुकालमात और मुखातबात का शर्फ भी जिससे हम इसका चेहरा देखते हैं इस बुजुर्ग नबी के जरिए से हमें मुयस्सर आया है। इस आफ्ताब हयात की शुआ धूप की तरह हम पर पड़ती है और इस वक्त तक हम मुनव्वर रह सकते हैं जब तक कि हम इसके मुकाबिल पर खड़े हैं। So now the question is, why did he insist on this concept of Fana fi Rasul? Why did he make it public? It was a personal relationship that he had with the Prophet Muhammad and a spiritual height that he had attained. The reason for bringing forward this claim was that he was passionate that the world should see that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a living prophet. Through following his guidance, it was still possible to achieve the spiritual heights that the companions of the Holy Prophet had attained during his life. He says, the blessings of former prophet have come to an end, and Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet for all nations. That is the living and final prophet whose spiritual strength and blessings of prophethood continue today as they will continue till the end of time. After the advent of Prophet Muhammad, it is only amongst his followers that people have been born who through the blessings of following him perfectly have achieved nearness to God and have been blessed with communion with him. There is no other living religion besides Islam, and as there is no other living prophet besides Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose blessings of prophethood continue till today. So this was the reason that he insisted on the fact that revelation still exists. You can still attain spiritual heights through following the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A practical example of why this concept is so important is a debate that Bishop Lefroy in Lahore challenged all the Muslim community to about the living prophet and the sinless prophet, and he presented Hazrat Isa as the living prophet because many Muslims at that time and still continue to consider him to still be alive. In that debate, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad conclusively showed that Prophet Isa or Jesus is dead and the only living prophet is Prophet Muhammad, and through his example showed that you can still attain to spiritual heights by following his example. And after this debate, he re-challenged the bishops and the missionary community to come and argue with him again, and no one came forward because his arguments were so conclusive. So keeping this in mind, we see that the true concept is that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was truly Fana fi Rasul. He had so much love for the Prophet that he was an image of the Prophet. And he says, I will also read this share in Farsi because the wordings are beautiful. He says, Padas Khuda ba ishke Muhammad Muhammaram, kar kuf-i bood ba Khuda sakht kafiram. After the love of Allah, I am intoxicated by the love of Muhammad. And if this is disbelief, then by Allah, I am an unbeliever. So now the question is, these are really great words, but were these just words? Did he actually do what he claimed to do? And if we study his life, which has been extensively written upon, there are biographies about him. There's an extensive 3-volume book called Mujaddid-e-Azam, which in detail shows how he spent his life. And we see that his life is dedicated to spreading the true teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. His writings were always based on facts, and they were not exaggerated descriptions of beauty or miracles. There were actual examples from the Prophet's life that showed his perfection. He wrote over 80 books and pamphlets in this regard. And one of his most famous books is Brahine Ahmadiyya, in which he challenged anyone to refute the arguments that he had presented. And he even offered a reward of 10,000 rupees, which was a huge amount of money at that time, but no one came forward. He expresses this in his poem, and again I will read it in Urdu, and the translation is there for you on the screen. हर तरफ फिक्र को दौड़ा के थकाया हमने, कोई दीन मोहम्मद सा न पाया हमने, कोई मजहब नहीं ऐसा के निशान दिखलाए, ये समर बागे मोहम्मद से ही पाया हमने, हमने इस्लाम को खुद तजर्बा करके देखा, नूर है नूर आओ देखो सुनाया हमने, मुस्तफा पर तेरा बेहद हो सलाम और रहमत, मुस्तफा पर तेरा हो बेहद सलाम और रहमत, उससे ये नूर लिया बारे खुदाया हमने. Now, another great show of his love for the Prophet was that he could not bear to have any disrespect shown to the Prophet Muhammad. He actually cut off relations with an aunt and close cousins because they were disrespectful to the Prophet. Whenever he engaged in a debate in a multi-faith setup or with anyone, his first rule was that respect for religious leaders would be maintained, both for Prophet Muhammad and for the other side. He immediately refuted any allegations that were presented against the Prophet. These included allegations on him about his battles, about his wives. He wrote books or pamphlets in response to any accusation that he came across. Some examples are of Kashma-e Marfat, Haqiqatul Wahi, which were specifically directed to attacks that were made on the Prophet's character. When he once came across a book that was disrespectful to the Prophet, he said, "My peace has been shattered. It is easier for me to bear patiently the loss of my wealth or the slaughter of my children before my own eyes, rather than to see and be patient at the disparagement and defamation of Prophet Muhammad and his religion." So this was the passion that he had, and this was the passion that he acted on, and he would not rest till he had written something in response to whatever defaming literature he found. Another show of his love for the Prophet Muhammad was that not only did he work tirelessly for this mission himself, he developed a Jamaat that purely followed the Prophet's example and whose mission was to present the correct teachings of Islam and Prophet Muhammad to the world. His every deed and spoken word was in accordance with the Quran and Hadith, and this is what he taught his followers. So when Dr. Basharat Ahmed, one of his disciples, joined his Jamaat, he asked him to show him how to attain closeness to God and what to do as his follower, because the tradition at that time, and I think it still continues today, is that when people take bath of a leader, they give them all kinds of chants or wazifas or things to do that they have to follow to get closeness to Allah Ta'ala. And all that Hazrat Sahib said, and this is what Dr. Basharat Ahmed quotes, is he said, "Perform your daily prayers with the utmost understanding and attention, and perform the tahajjud late night prayers, for this is the tradition of the Prophet." He said, "Follow the Prophet and you will find Allah." And in regards to establishing his Jamaat, he says, "Allah has created our Jamaat to establish the true prophethood and glory of Prophet Muhammad." This is a quote from his book Fatwa Ahmadiyya, page 91, where he says, अल्लाह ताला ने हमारी इस जमात को इसलिए कायम किया है कि हजरत की नबूवत और इज्जत को दोबारा कायम करें. So that is the mission that has been entrusted to us. So in conclusion, let's look at some of the things that we've talked about. And this is definitely not an all-inclusive talk. I've just highlighted just some of the things that he did. We see that he was a follower of the Sunnah. He was a defender against all allegations. He created a movement for this. He provided conclusive evidence for the finality of prophethood, which I did not touch upon because it's already been discussed by Dr. Aisha earlier in the session. He provided proof of a living prophet through his personal example. And he provided that Hazrat Muhammad was the perfect prophet to follow, who had all the perfect characteristics of previous prophets, all enclosed in one personality. There are a couple of famous ahadiths of the Prophet Muhammad where he says that you do not love me truly till you love me more than your family, your children, your life, your wealth, and all worldly things. And there's another hadith where he says that if you follow my example, then you have truly loved me. And if we look at the life of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, he fulfilled all these criteria that the Prophet himself has set in his ahadith for those that love him truly. So I think there is no doubt about the great love that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad had for Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I will end by sharing these two verses of Hazrat Sahib. He says, "Speak to me neither of heaven nor hell. I spend my life like a man who is deranged with sorrow and concern for the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever the task of the restoration of faith is turning through my mind, I become completely oblivious to the joys and sorrow of this temporal world. May my very existence be sacrificed in the love of Prophet Muhammad. This then is my intention, my prayer, and my heartfelt wish." Thank you so much for giving me a chance to share my thoughts on this topic. And I will end with the prayer that may Allah fill all of our hearts with the love for the Prophet Muhammad that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad had wanted us to do, and then to work for the propagation of his religion, and to make this our prayer as well, that our existence be sacrificed in the love of Prophet Muhammad. May this be our intention, our prayer, and our heartfelt wish also. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Halima, for that wonderful presentation. Now, we would like to shift gears at this point in the program. We have identified various incorrect assumptions many Muslims hold that cause barriers to understanding Hazrat Mirza Sahib's actual claims. And we presented points which clarified those incorrect assumptions, thereby providing a platform from which more productive discussions may be had. Our next presentation has a different focus. It is a tribute to the great Lahore Ahmadi missionary Maulana Hafiz Sher Muhammad, and in particular, his role as the expert witness in the historic South Africa case. Hafiz Sahib had brilliantly presented evidence concerning Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's claims, which resulted in the Lahore Ahmadi victory. And through Hafiz Sahib's work, we were very fortunate to have all of the evidence and rebuttals accessible for compilation in an easy to follow manner, making the study of this topic very easy for us. Our presenter is Mr. Ibrahim Muhammad. Mr. Muhammad is the president of the South Africa Jamaat and has been the pillar of strength for the Jamaat for many years, and he is the ideal person for presenting on our next topic. Mr. Ibrahim Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope and pray that you are all well with the grace of Almighty Allah. I'm honored to have been given the opportunity to pay tribute to a remarkable figure such as Maulana Hafiz Sher Muhammad, of fond and cherished memories for the sterling role he played as an expert witness in the Ahmadiyya case here in South Africa. Please allow me to briefly explain the events that led to our encounter with such a respected scholar and missionary of our Jamaat. In 1980, after the death of the founder of the organization, Dawood Saido, the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement in South Africa, embarked on an ambitious plan to raise public funds to build much needed missionary and prayer facilities for our Jamaat. However, to raise such public funds required municipal approval, which required publishing our intentions in 2 newspapers to give the public an opportunity to respond if needs be. A local Sunni clerical body objected to our application on the grounds that because of our association with Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, whom they alleged claimed to be a prophet, we were not Muslims and therefore did not have the right to build an Islamic center. Strangely, they did not object to us raising the funds as long as it was not for an Islamic center. The irony of the matter was that the overwhelming Christian majority, together with members of other faiths, did not object, except for this self-appointed body of clerics claiming to speak on behalf of the Muslims. But that was not all. They went on a nationwide anti-Ahmadi hate campaign, using the pulpits in all their mosques to spread false propaganda about the founder of the movement, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, calling him by all sorts of dirty names. Since the country was experiencing political turmoil and unrest at the time, they saw it opportune to agitate the already inflamed sentiments of unwary followers who believed every word that emanated from the pulpits. Out of fear for our safety and security, after much deliberation, we finally decided to seek relief from the courts. Thus, in 1982, we filed for an interdict asserting our legal rights as Muslims and calling for the prohibition of the spread of malicious and defamatory matter directed at Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad and members of our movement. This action we soon realized required an expert witness to deal with the false allegations made against Hazrat Mirza Sahib, who was now made the central figure in the dispute. One Hafiz Sher Muhammad, who was in Fiji at the time, was informed of our dilemma. He sent us a very comforting telegram that was like manna from heaven at the time, because we were experiencing enormous stress. It was later confirmed that despite his frail health, he was determined to come to South Africa for the trial, to exonerate the name of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Because of the exaggerated frenzy created by the clerics, the Ahmadiyya case soon hit the headlines in South Africa and other parts of the world. Several high-ranking judges and government officials and clerics from Pakistan were listed as being seconded to come to South Africa to assist the local clerics who had already garnered the support of all the local ulama bodies in the country. On our side, we secured the help of one single witness, the slightly built Maulana Hafiz Sher Muhammad. The situation could be likened to a scene from the legendary David and Goliath encounter. And for a while we had a slight taste of what Muslims at Badr must have felt when they faced the might of the Quraysh. From a position of obscurity, the name Maulana Hafiz Sher Muhammad, brave and valiant defender of the truth and the honor of the Mujaddid of the age, soon became the buzz amongst the religious scholars and the media here in South Africa and abroad. The vibe was electric, to say the least, and we could sense the divine hand at play that pointed to a mission far greater than the court case itself. For it was indeed providence that restored the Maulana's health and gave him the strength and removed all logistical obstacles that made it possible for him to travel to a distant country like South Africa to carry out his ordained mission to the best of his ability. A feat, as we now know, he achieved par excellence. Providence was indeed on the side of Maulana Hafiz Sher Muhammad. In fact, when we look back at the career of this noble soldier of Islam, we see such providential intervention steering the young Sher Muhammad in a very specific direction towards the Mujaddid of the age, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, on whom be peace. Hafiz Sher Muhammad hails from the little town of Kusab, situated at the foothills of a mountainous range in the Punjab province of Pakistan. His ancestors were from the Ahlul Hadith Deoband school. They built their own mosque and were highly respected in the area for their learning and piety. Sher Muhammad started memorizing the Holy Quran from the early age of 4. He was schooled in religious matters by his father and grandparents in the mosque. When he used to visit the local shop as a child, he always used to see the shopkeeper reading books. Out of sheer youthful curiosity, he inquired from the shopkeeper what he was reading. The shopkeeper, an Ahmadi Muslim of the Qadian Jamaat, told him it was from the writings of the promised Messiah and Mahdi. When he was about 12 years old, he asked the shopkeeper to lend him some of the books to read. The shopkeeper refused, but offered him a space in the back of the shop where he could read the books. On reading these books, Sher Muhammad became convinced that the traditional belief that the Prophet Jesus was alive in the heavens and will return to earth was not true, according to arguments presented by the promised Messiah from the Holy Quran. It is said he convinced his grandfather and his father of this. At the age of 15, Sher Muhammad passed the Maulvi Fazl examination in Arabic and literature at the Punjab University. He then went to study at the Dar al-Ulum in Lahore, where he completed the Dars-i-Nizami course. At the time, this was considered the highest course of study in religion and religious philosophy that qualifies a person to teach postgraduate students. Now well schooled in Islamic studies of the highest available rank, he kept studying the works of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad and was soon convinced of his claims as the Mujaddid of the 14th century, the promised Messiah and Mahdi, but was still uncertain about prophethood as expounded by his Qadiani friends. He once attended their Jalsa in Qadian, however not convinced of their explanations of prophethood. He told his friends, the shopkeeper, that he will not join their Jamaat till someone gives him a satisfactory explanation of the word Nabi and the doctrine of Nubuwwah as followed by them. On his way back from Qadian, Hafiz Sahib was waiting for a connecting train at the Lahore railway station, where it just so happened that he met a Lahori Ahmadi from his village whom he knew. He too was waiting for the same train with his family. On his inquiry as to what he was doing there, Hafiz Sahib told him the story of his visit to Qadian. That gentleman invited him to seek an explanation of his queries from Maulana Muhammad Ali. Both postponed their homeward journeys and went to see Maulana Muhammad Ali at Muslim town Lahore. On Hafiz Sahib's inquiry, Maulana Muhammad Ali explained in detail the concept around Nubuwwat, the finality of prophethood, and the context in which Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad used the word in relation to himself. Excuse me for that. In a few minutes, the whole matter became crystal clear to him. With this clarity of mind, he retired to the guest house for the evening. During the night, he lay awake thinking about the logic and rationale of Maulana Muhammad Ali's explanation. And by the next morning, he had made up his mind and took the pledge at the hands of Maulana Muhammad Ali. He returned to Husab and announced it to his family members and friends. Hafiz Sahib served under Maulana Muhammad Ali and held many roles in the Anjuman as editor and author of several booklets and magazines, and wrote many articles. He was missionary in Fiji for several years. In the end, he served as vice president of the Central Anjuman before returning to his Mecca. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Maulana Hafiz Sher Muhammad came to South Africa in 1983. As soon as people came to hear of his presence in Cape Town, he received many visitors. Despite the enormity of the task that lay ahead, he never turned a visitor away and would welcome them with a pleasant smile, accompanied by warm, jovial comments. Our greatest disappointment was the language divide. None of us knew Urdu and could not communicate freely with him, and we had so many questions to ask him. A good friend of the Jamaat that knew a bit of Urdu came to our rescue in the initial stages. However, it was much better when later Dr. Zahid Aziz arrived as the official interpreter. Everywhere Hafiz Sahib went, he was a veritable beacon of light and knowledge. He removed many misconceptions and doubts people had about Islam, the Ahmadiyya movement and its founder as well. He exuded an excellent blend of knowledge, confidence, humility, and sainthood, and everyone that met him loved his company and talks. However, preparing for the trial was an arduous task that involved many late nights and often working throughout the night. In his defense of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, Hafiz Sahib's approach was to directly explain the writings of Hazrat Mirza Sahib himself. In this way, he proved that Lahore Ahmadis followed the interpretations of Hazrat Mirza Sahib himself, and not some self-styled loose interpretations taken completely out of context that caused so much confusion and misunderstanding. Hafiz Sahib's years of extensive and in-depth study of all the original works of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad gave him a tremendous advantage over his learned opponents in the South Africa case, none of whom it later emerged had studied all, if any, of the actual original works of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. His knowledge that extended beyond the standard works of the Anjuman proved invaluable. He also proved that the writings of Hazrat Mirza Sahib encompass all branches of Islamic theology, philosophy and metaphysics. Thus the challenges presented by the South Africa case no doubt brought out the best of Hafiz Sahib that most probably would have been lost to the world. His prized evidence has been captured in an encyclopedic book entitled The Ahmadiyya Case, compiled by Dr. Zaid Aziz for all to see, and is especially invaluable for religious and legal students today and in the future. Therefore, due to the tireless efforts of Maulana Hafiz Sharma, the world now has clarity at their fingertips of contentious issues with regard to specific Islamic doctrines that have come into international spotlight with the rise of an extremist culture in the form of terror groups such as ISIS and others we are all too familiar with. The sad part is that the very ulama that opposed us are still struggling with extremism and unable to give clear guidance to their followers. To save face, some in the end had to succumb to the enlightened interpretations of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. In a Sunni-Shia conflict in our country about a year ago, it was not surprising to hear many enlightened scholars from both sides eager to stop Takfiri ideologies, using the same arguments presented to the court by Hafiz Sharma with regard to the true definition of a Muslim as taught by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and as upheld by the Mujaddid of the age, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. From these same Sunni Shia sources, it is now also very pleasing to hear that jihad does not mean aggressive, unprovoked violence with the aim to convert or punish. They concur it is a struggle to overcome one's base nature, to stand up for justice and righteousness with the Holy Quran, and to defend the truth with arguments and the pen in this age as taught by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, as explained to the court by Maulana Hafiz Shar Muhammad. After months of preparing for the trial, on the morning when both parties finally met in court, even before the trial could commence, the clerics threw in the towel and walked away in abject, self-inflicted humiliation on the grounds of a belated fatwa that a secular court cannot determine who is a Muslim. A fatwa the same clerics a few years later dismissed as invalid, as we will see. However, although not required by the court to do so, Hafiz Sahib nevertheless decided to deliver his full evidence in the Supreme Court of Cape Town, as it served as an ideal open public forum for anyone to come and listen to the explanations of the claims and teachings of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad directly from his own writings, especially that he did not make any claim to prophethood, period. In the end, Justice Williamson of the Supreme Court of Cape Town, South Africa, declared that the members of our Jamaat Ismail Peck, who sued in his personal capacity, was indeed a Muslim and entitled to all the rights pertaining to a Muslim. He went further and declared, and I quote, "First defendant, that is the clerical body, is interdicted from disseminating, publishing, or otherwise propagating false, harmful, malicious, and defamatory matter of and concerning members of the Ahmadiyya Anjuman Ishati Islam Lahore, South Africa, including second plaintiff, that is Ismail Peck, namely that such members are non-Muslims, disbelievers, kafir, apostates, murtads, and that they reject the finality of Prophet of Muhammad. That they are non-believers and as such are to be denied admittance to mosques and to Muslim burial grounds. That marriage with an Ahmadi is prohibited by Muslims. So they are now prohibited from disseminating such false allegations. Justice J. Williamson had the following to say about Hafiz Shir Muhammad, and I quote him: "In my estimation, the witness is a man of great learning and integrity. He gave evidence before me for some 6 days and created an extremely favorable impression. An extremely favorable impression. I accept his evidence without hesitation." MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. In the second case, a local Sunni Sheikh Muhammad Jassim brought a charge of defamation against the same clerical body and its president, Sheikh Nazim Muhammad. Sheikh Jassim, the plaintiff, was defamed because he refused to debar Ahmadis to attend his mosque. This time the defendants, contrary to their own fatwa produced in the first case, approached a secular court to determine whether Jassim, who refused to call Ahmadis kafir, was a Muslim. This time they brought an expert witness, namely Professor Ghazi from Pakistan, to testify on their behalf against Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Professor Ghazi was from the International University of Islamabad, Pakistan, and was later appointed as a judge of the Sharia Appellate Court, and still later became Federal Minister of Religious Affairs of Pakistan. Maulana Hafiz Shir Muhammad was again approached to defend the beliefs of Hazrat Mirza Sahib, even though no Ahmadi was a direct party to the case, nor was the court required to determine whether Ahmadis were Muslims or not. On this occasion, Hafiz Sahib was pitted against the best the opposition could present. He gave extensive evidence from July to September 1987 under hostile cross-examination. In the end, the judge determined that it was not necessary to rule whether Jassim was a Muslim or not, as it was a clear-cut case of defamation that he was subjected to by the head of the clerical body, and for which he was awarded damages. However, in summing up the two expert witnesses, the judge had, among other things, to say, and I quote, "As a witness, Professor Ghazi has the disadvantage that he correctly concedes that where the government of the day supports an idea, that idea flourishes. The judge then also says of him, of possible interpretations put on Mirza Sahib's words and actions, he, Ghazi, always chose the worst. His evidence was often illogical, inferences unjustified." Shir Muhammad, who had to break down prejudice perhaps, and not any identifiable opponent, impressed as more reasonable and tolerant. Impressed as more reasonable and tolerant. Being interested in the spiritual advancement of Islam, rather the Ahmadism as such, than Ghazi, whose interests lie in politics rather than spirituality. If we now compare this assessment by the respected judge of Maulana Hafiz Shir Muhammad's testimony with these words of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who said, and I quote, Our religion is the same Islam. It is not new. They are the same prayers, the same fasts, the same pilgrimage, and the same zakat. But there is this difference that these duties had by now assumed outward forms only, without any true spirit in them. We want to infuse in them the spirit of sincerity. Rahani Haza'in. We see now a great moral victory for the spiritual revivalist mission of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad and the Ahmadiyya movement that Hafiz Sahib achieved. So, to Maulana Hafiz Shir Muhammad of blessed memories, we say, dear sir, you have been an excellent ambassador for the noble teachings of the divinely ordained Mujaddid, promised Messiah and Mahdi of the age, in such a way that you deservedly drew the admiration of an unbiased judge, and will no doubt capture the admiration of all honest, just and fair-minded people around the world. We applaud you, Hafiz Sahib. You deserve a posthumous standing ovation. May Almighty Allah, the best of judges, reward you abundantly. Amen. Jazakallah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ibrahim Muhammad, for that very inspiring talk. We would like to end the program with two presentations that offer a reminder of what the true objectives of the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement are. This is important for two reasons. First, when debating theological issues, sometimes people get so caught up that they argue for the sake of being right and forget the underlying objective of religion and of the movement. Second, just because we may hold the right belief about Hazrat Mirza Sahib, it must be appreciated that that in and of itself does not satisfy the actual objectives of the movement. So, in the first of these two presentations, we would like to share Hazrat Mirza Sahib's views on a primary objective of his mission being to facilitate the inner reformation of the individual, that is, provide for the spiritual development of the soul. The lesson being, the objective of the movement is not to simply win theological arguments or academic debates, but rather to achieve closeness to God. Our presenter is Dr. Muhammad Ahmad. Dr. Ahmad is the president of the USA Jamaat, and as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, he has recently been devoting much time to the valuable work of translating Maulana Muhammad Ali's khutbas into English, which we are all very excited about. Dr. Ahmad.
My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. It is a pleasure to participate in this year's annual convention, despite it being in a different format. As you all know, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was the Mujaddid, divinely appointed reformer of the 14th century Hijrah. The work of such reformers is to facilitate inner spiritual reform of individuals in order to facilitate a closer relationship with God. This is an important lesson that must not be forgotten. Certainly, reformers clarify matters of belief and practice, but that is only a means to the end. For instance, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad clarified many matters concerning Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, but the objective was not to simply win an argument regarding the correctness of certain beliefs. Indeed, he proved that belief in Hazrat Isa being alive for 2000 years in heaven is beyond the capacity of a human and is incorrect. He also proved the belief in Hazrat Isa, a prophet of God, returning to earth after the Holy Prophet Muhammad is incorrect. It would violate the principle of finality of prophethood of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. These clarifications concerning Hazrat Isa also have a much deeper implication. By clarifying the matters concerning Hazrat Isa, Hazrat Mirza Sahib provides for a purer understanding of and appreciation for the unity of God and the status of Holy Prophet Muhammad. These clarifications are not meant to simply be accepted for argument's sake, but rather are to be a means for achieving a closer and purer connection with the divine. The true objective of inner spiritual reformation for the Ahmadiyya Jamaat is seen from the 10 conditions of the Bayat or pledge. To summarize the 10 conditions of this covenant, they are as follows: that till the last day of my life, I shall abstain from shirk, associating any partners with Allah. That I shall keep away from falsehood, cruelty, adultery, dishonesty, rebellion, and every kind of evil. That I shall offer prayers 5 times daily. That I shall not inflict injury on any of Allah's creatures. That I will bear every hardship for the sake of Allah. That I shall not follow vulgar customs and guard against evil inclinations. That I shall discard pride and haughtiness, live in humility and meekness. That I shall hold my faith's dignity and the welfare of Islam dearer than my own life, wealth, and children. That I shall have sympathy for all of God's creatures and devote my talents to their welfare. That I shall establish brotherhood with Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, obeying him in all good things, and firmly adhere to these rules until the last breath of my life. Hazrat Mirza Sahib explains in his book Kishti-e-Nu how these 10 conditions are meant to cause a spiritual change in the person. He writes, "Let it be clear that to affirm the covenant of Bayat with the tongue alone amounts to nothing unless it is practiced with full, heartfelt resolve. Thus, whosoever fully acts upon my teachings enters that house of mine concerning which Almighty God has promised in His word, I shall protect everyone who is within the 4 walls of your home. This should not be taken to mean only such people who dwell in my house made of brick and mortar. Rather, this also refers to all those who follow me completely and dwell in my spiritual home. In order to observe my teachings in the proper manner, it is essential that one should believe that there is an all-powerful, all-sustaining, supreme being, the creator of everything, changeless, everlasting, and eternal. He has no father and no son. He is holy, so there is no need or occasion for him to go on the cross, nor suffer in any way, nor subject to death. He is such that despite being far, he is near, and despite being near, he is far. Despite being one, his manifestations are diverse. For a person who brings about a change in himself, he becomes a new God for him and deals with him by means of new manifestation. Thus, such a person experiences a change in God according to the change in himself. Yet no change takes place in God. He is eternally unchangeable and possesses complete perfection. But when a person undergoes a transformation and begins to move towards virtue, God manifests himself to such a person in a new way. At the time of every improved condition that manifests itself in a person, the manifestation of God Almighty's power also reveals itself to a greater extent. He manifests his might in an extraordinary way. Only when an extraordinary change takes place in a person. This is the root of all extraordinary happenings and miracles. The God so described is the fundamental bedrock of my community. Believe in Him and give precedence to Him over your own souls and comforts and over all your relationships. Show sincerity and loyalty in His cause by exhibiting courage in your practice. Worldly people do not prefer Him over their means and their kith and kin, but you ought to, so that you may be counted in heaven as belonging to His community. In the same book, Hazrat Mirza Sahib provides an emotional appeal to transform one's way to living a righteous life, as then only is one truly worthy of being in his community. He writes, "O you people who consider yourself members of my community, you will be counted as such in heaven when you truly tread upon the way of righteousness. So offer the 5 daily prayers in such fear and with such complete attention as though you were actually beholding God Almighty. Sincerely observe your fast for the sake of God. Let everyone who is liable to pay the zakat do so, and anyone upon whom the Hajj has become obligatory and who faces no hindrance ought to perform the pilgrimage. Do all good deeds with the proper care they deserve, while forsaking evil with real repulsion of the heart. Bear in mind that no action of yours which is empty of righteousness can reach God. Righteousness is the root of all goodness. No action that is rooted in righteousness will go in vain. It is inevitable that you should also be tried with various forms of anguish and misfortune, just as the faithful before you were tried. Be on your guard lest you should falter. So long as you have a firm relationship with heaven, the earth can do you no harm. Whenever harm befalls you, it will be from your own hands, and not from the hands of your enemy. Even if you lose all honor on earth, God will bestow eternal honor on you in heaven. So do not forsake Him." He then goes on to write of the inner spiritual transformation that is the true purpose of the movement. He states, "Be careful lest a few accomplishments delude you to think that you have sufficiently fulfilled your purpose. For God desires a complete transformation in your being, and His demands from you, and He demands from you a death whereafter He should revive you. Hasten to Him to make peace. Hasten to make peace with one another, and forgive your brethren their sins. For he who is not inclined to make peace with his brother is wicked and will be cut off, because he is the cause of dissension. Part with your ego in every way, and do away with mutual grievances. Be humble like the guilty, though truth be on your side, so that you may be forgiven. Do not feed your vanity, for those who are bloated cannot enter the gate to which you have been called. For you, another very essential teaching is this, that you do not treat the Holy Quran like a book that has been forsaken, since it is in this book and nowhere else that your life lies. Throughout the world there is now no book for mankind except the Holy Quran. For humanity there is no messenger and mediator except Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Hazrat Mirza Sahib has written volumes on how to facilitate this transformation and progress in the path of spirituality. His paper, The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, is a prime example. He provides in detail an understanding of the nature of the soul, the various stages of the soul, the significance and purpose of trials and hardships, and the method by which base animal desires can be transformed into high moral attributes. So he has not simply lectured about the objective to be attained, but provided the detailed guidance needed to achieve it. I will end my presentation here. May Almighty Allah help each of us in our journeys to achieve the moral and spiritual transformation required to truly be a part of Hazrat Mirza Sahib's movement. And may He help us always remember this true objective and not lose sight of it whenever engaging in debate about the correctness of theological views or religious interpretations. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for those beautiful words. The other primary objective of the Ahmadiyya movement is to engage in practical work, to educate about the true nature of Islam. As we all know, this is primarily done through our literature. And historically, the distribution of our literature was facilitated by missions in the West, such as Woking and Berlin. Later, Mrs. Samina Malik of the USA Jamaat was able to facilitate having our literature in distribution pipelines in the USA, and more recently, she has done the same in the UK. The USA Jamaat has also transitioned our literature into electronic mediums, such as ebooks and apps for devices such as phones and iPads, to maintain its prominence in new emerging markets. And for the past several decades, the US Jamaat has engaged in having our Jamaat's literature translated into a host of languages and distributed throughout the world. Our next presentation will focus on the current work being done, and in particular in West Africa, which is an example of the type of practical work envisioned by Hazrat Mirza Sahib. We have been able to print and ship tens of thousands of our French translations, primarily the French translation of the Holy Quran, to Mali. We have partnered with the prominent Muslim leader, Sufi Sheikh Bilal, who is a great admirer of Maulana Muhammad Ali and who is in a position to widely distribute our literature throughout the region. You will learn about the building of the Maulana Muhammad Ali Quran Distribution Center to establish the ongoing activities of this project, and the construction of the Sheikh Maulana Muhammad Ali Institute for Quran Studies, in which Maulana Muhammad Ali's books are being utilized for the Islamic education of students, and which can really be a prototype for how an entire generation of students in the region can be equipped with the ammunition our spiritual literature provides to rebut the extremist ideologies being infiltrated into the region from places like Saudi Arabia. Our presenter for this final presentation is Mrs. Samina Malik, the catalyst for all of this work that I've just mentioned. Mrs. Malik is the Vice President of the USA Jamaat and the Director in charge of publication and translation. The number of her accomplishments for the Jamaat in these two fields are too many to list. So without further ado, I present to you Mrs. Samina Malik.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is the last and final prophet. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Fazil, for your nice introduction. I will be presenting to you today a report on the work being done to continue the legacy of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's mission of reform by the Lahore Ahmadiyya Islamic Society, which is the US branch of the International Lahore Ahmadiyya Movement. The primary focus of our work is on publication. This includes translation projects, coordinating printing in various parts of the world, and generating copies for distribution on the ground. Another aspect of our work concerns establishing centers to assist in the book distribution and holding and participating in conferences, seminars, and lecture presentations which address the need of local people. The work also entails two approaches. One is to educate non-Muslims about the religion of Islam as a spiritual and inspiring faith distinct from the radical interpretations from extremist groups, so as to build bridges of understanding among multi-faith societies. And two is to bring about reform in some Muslim societies where lack of proper understanding about Islam is giving rise to radical views and acts of violent extremism. These ideas of literature as the primary vehicle which would bring about the correct understanding of Islam among both the Muslims and non-Muslims was advanced by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad himself and cannot be overestimated. He writes in his book, Izala Eoham. So my advice is that writing of a good book, a good type, should be sent into those countries. If my people help me heart and soul, I wish to prepare a commentary of the Holy Quran as well, which should be sent to them after it has been rendered into the English language. I cannot refrain from stating clearly that this is my work and that no one else can do it so well as I, or he who is an offshoot of mine and thus is included in me. This was also the lifelong desire of Maulana Muhammad Ali, who fulfilled Hazrat Mirza Sahib's wish to translate the Holy Quran into English. Maulana Muhammad Ali expressed this desire on his deathbed when he said to Mian Nasir Ahmad Farooqi Sahib, "Our work is to take the Quran into the world. After that, the Quran would do its own work." Pre-World War II, the Holy Quran was translated into English, Dutch, and German, and together with other books of the Jamaat distributed through centers established by the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement in England, the Walking Mosque, and Germany, the Moschee. The work, however, languished after Maulana Muhammad Ali's death in 1951 and came to a halt when the severe anti-Ahmadiyya laws were put into place by the government of General Ziaul Haq in Pakistan. The Central Anjuman, under the leadership of Dr. Sayyid Ahmad of blessed memory, then decided to shift the publication and translation work from Pakistan to the USA Jamaat. I was put in charge of the publication and translation work of the USA Jamaat in 1987, and since then, Alhamdulillah, our publication and translation work has increased by leaps and bounds. The full complement of our English books, including Maulana Muhammad Ali's master work, the English translation of the Holy Quran, are now available worldwide in print, ebook, app, and audio format as well. The advent of the digital age has increased the exposure of our books manyfold. By the grace of Almighty Allah, most of our literature has been translated into the world's major languages. Maulana Muhammad Ali's English translation of the Holy Quran has been translated into German, Italian, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, Chinese, Tagalog, Hebrew, Albanian, Turkish, and the commentary of the English Holy Quran has been translated into Arabic. The most recent addition to the published Qurans is the Chinese translation of the Holy Quran by Maulana Muhammad Ali. The translation and typesetting costs have been paid by Dr. Muhammad Ahmed and Sister Lubna Ahmed. May Allah Almighty bless and reward them for their sacrifice. The Quran translation, combined with those of our major books such as the Religion of Islam, Manual of Hadith, Muhammad the Prophet, Ali Caliphate, Teaching of Islam, The New World Order, Introduction to the Study of the Holy Quran, and other books form a treasure trove of the healing message of Islam for a world wrecked by conflict and bloodshed. We have distributed free hundreds of thousands of copies of the Holy Quran to libraries, professors of theology, Islamic studies, and individuals in Russia, Germany, India, South Africa, the United States, and Australia. We are in the process of distributing these books free to libraries and university professors in UK and France. Besides distributing our literature, we hold conferences, symposia, and lectures in different countries such as France, Holland, Turkish, Philippines, South Africa, USA, West Africa, Egypt, Russia, Nigeria, Ghana, and Kyrgyzstan. One very significant event in our efforts to promote a better understanding of the Ahmadiyya movement has been the presentation of a paper titled An Assessment of the Claim of Prophethood, attributed to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement, by Fazil, at a conference held at the Faculty of Comparative Studies of Religions and Humanism in Belgium. This paper, much of which forms the basis of our conference today, will be accessible to researchers throughout the world as it has been published by an academic journal and will be available on academic research database. Inshallah, it will be very helpful in producing the correct understanding of Hazrat Mirza Sahib's claim. In this presentation, I would like to focus on the current work being done in West Africa, especially in Mali, which is an example of the type of practical work in which we should be engaged. Maulana Muhammad Ali once had a dream in which he saw that he was packing his suitcase to go to Africa. That trip, however, never took place. However, as events are unfolding, it appears that the significance of the dream was that although he himself would not go to Africa, his books would find wide acceptance there. In Mali, we have partnered with the Grand Sufi Sheikh Bilal Diallo, who is the religious leader of millions of people spread over several countries in French-speaking West Africa. On our first trip in December 2018, I presented Grand Sheikh Sufi Bilal Diallo a copy of the French Holy Quran and Religion of Islam. After reading Maulana Muhammad Ali's French Holy Quran translation, he has become a great admirer of Maulana Muhammad Ali and is determined to make his Quran translation as the most widely read Quran translation in French-speaking West Africa. In February 2019, we again visited Mali to attend a Jalsa sponsored by Sufi Sheikh Bilal to introduce Maulana Muhammad Ali's Holy Quran French translation to his members. Sufi Sheikh Bilal was very happy to receive the Qurans, and in the Jalsa, he held the Quran aloft and talked about the excellence of the translation in front of an audience of 1,000 people. In July 2019, we visited Mali for the opening ceremony of the Maulana Muhammad Ali Center for the Holy Quran Distribution, which Numan and I had helped complete for storing the Holy Quran and other books of our movement that the USA Jamaat was shipping to Mali. It was other parts of Mali receiving their share of the French Holy Qurans. In November 2019, Noman and I were invited as guests of honor by Grand Sufi Sheikh Bilal and attend a Maloud conference marking the birthday of the Holy Prophet Muhammad in Bamako, Mali. In the conference, we witnessed Sheikh Sufi Bilal Diallo's love for Maulana Muhammad Ali's French translation of the Holy Quran. One of the main events in the 3-day conference was to introduce Maulana Muhammad Ali's French Quran to the conference attendees. During his entry into the stadium, the venue for the event, and throughout the proceeding, he held aloft the translation and praised it in front of 40,000 strong cheering crowd. He gave a lecture on Surah Al-Alaq using Maulana Muhammad Ali's Holy Quran French translation. Noman and I also gave short speeches praising his wise leadership and his support of Maulana Muhammad Ali's French Holy Quran translation. On the last day of the Jalsa, which was on Sunday, I was asked to give a lecture. I told them about the Ahmadiyya movement and spoke about the service rendered to Islam by Hazrat Mirza, and that we firmly believe that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, was the last and final prophet. Everyone was very happy to listen to me. To date, the US Jamaat has shipped the following books to Mali: 42,000 French Holy Quran and 6,000 each of the Religion of Islam, Manual of Hadith, Muhammad the Prophet, the Ali Caliphate, Teaching of Islam, Introduction to Islam, True Conception of Jihad, Islam the Religion of Humanity, Prophet of Islam, Living Thoughts of the Prophet Muhammad, Introduction to the Study of the Holy Quran, Message of Peace, and the History of the Prophets. May Almighty Allah reward and bless all the members and Jamaats who have contributed to this project of distributing our literature in West Africa. Next year, inshallah, we will be sending them the following books: The Ahmadiyya Movement, Muhammadan World Scriptures, Muslim Prayer Book, The Ahmadiyya Case, Islam My Only Choice, founder of the Ahmadiyya Movement. All these books are already translated, proofread, and will be typeset and proofread again and will be distributed to West Africa and France. On our own, we do not have the logistic to distribute our literature in such a vast area, but the Grand Sufi Sheikh Bilal does. He has hundreds of Sufi centers scattered in these countries, and these are being used as distribution outlet for our books. Maulana Muhammad Ali's wished to have an institute for Quranic studies and research. Noman and I wanted to fulfill his wish, and we chose Mali as a location for the institute because of the large number of people who showed love and devotion for the Holy Quran translation and other books. We both built a large 12,000 square feet, two-story building named the Sheikh Maulana Muhammad Ali Institute for Quran Studies. In this institute, Maulana Muhammad Ali's books will be utilized for the Islamic education of students. This can serve as a prototype for how an entire generation of students in the region can be educated with the knowledge to rebut the extremist ideologies being spread into the region by jihadist elements. Please watch the video that will be played at the end of the conference. Sufi Sheikh Bilal also arranged a visit to Dakar and Touba in Senegal and sent his deputy Sheikh Shaido and Khalifa Ali to accompany us to these places and introduce us to the leading sheikhs in the area. Sheikh Shaido is Sufi Sheikh Bilal's deputy and is the head of administration. In the Sufi community, he is our main contact with Sufi Sheikh Bilal. Brother Daoud Bosson from France also accompanied us on this Senegal tour, Alhamdulillah. Likewise, the Lahore Ahmadiyya Islamic Society USA has sent 5,000 copies of French Holy Quran to Ivory Coast, where they have been distributed by the Grand Sufi Sheikh Bilal's deputy, Sufi Sheikh Abu Bakr Konate, who leads the Sufi organization in that country. In March 2019, Noman and I had attended a Jalsa organized by Sufi Sheikh Abu Bakr Konate, introducing the Maulana Muhammad Ali's French Holy Quran translation. At that time, we also met with the late president of the Ulema Council of the country, Sheikh Fafano, who was very pleased to receive the French Holy Quran translation. We donated 300 copies of the French Holy Quran to him for free distribution. In addition to supplying our books to the French West African countries, we also supply the French Holy Quran and other French books in France, where our brother, who is the Imam in France, and he is taking care of all the distribution in France. Now we have sent a large number of the English Holy Quran and other books of the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement to the English-speaking countries in West Africa. We have sent tens of thousands of the English Holy Quran to the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, Nigeria, which holds the same views as the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement, that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was a Mujaddid reformer, but not a prophet after the Holy Prophet Muhammad. The US Jamaat has also donated thousands of Holy Quran to another liberal organization, the Islamic Education Forum in Lagos, Nigeria. In Ghana, by the grace of Almighty Allah, we have been fortunate to find Dr. Hakeem Wima, a retired veterinary doctor and high government officials who greatly admires Maulana Muhammad Ali's English Holy Quran translation and is passionate about spreading it in Ghana. To date, we have shipped him almost 30,000 English Holy Quran, which has been distributed. May Allah Ta'ala reward him and his son Rashid Wima for the sacrifice of their time and resources they expend in arranging the Quran distribution. Inshallah, we will also supply them with other major books of our movement. In my concluding remarks, I would like to remind everyone about the precious gift that Allah the Most High has bestowed on us in the form of Maulana Muhammad Ali's English Holy Quran translation, and how important it is for us to share that gift with the rest of humanity. We are to fulfill our pledge to give preference to religion over worldly matters and bring peace to the troubled humanity. Jazakallah to those who have contributed towards this great striving in the way of Allah. May Almighty Allah bless and reward them for their sacrifice. Ameen. All those who would like to participate in this mighty striving may send their donation to Ahmadiyya Anjuman Ishaat Islam, Lahore, USA. Thank you for listening to me. May Allah Almighty bless you all and keep you safe in this pandemic. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi barakatuhu.
Thank you so much for that very moving and encouraging report. Well, that brings us to the close of our program today. We really hope you found the material informative and that you enjoyed your time with us. If you have any questions relating to any of the presentations today, please feel free to email them to us, and we'll be happy to provide our thoughts and possibly make them available publicly for others to benefit as well. We would like to leave you with a video that was sent to us by Sheikh Bilal in Mali about the collaborative work being done there. And we hope you will find the video insightful and inspiring. So may Almighty Allah be with each one of you. May He help us in defending Hazrat Mirza Sahib from the false allegations made against him, and give us the wisdom and the strength to work together in furtherance of the true objectives of the movement created by the Mujaddid of the time. Thank you all for joining us. Assalamu alaikum.
Shigo de Amaula Ahumeseko Shigo Bilali de Amaula Ahumeseko Fokiyama Shigo de Amaula Ahumeseko Fokiyama Shigo Bilali de Amaula Ahumeseko Fokiyama Shigo de Amaula Ahumeseko Shigo Bilali de Amaula Ahumeseko Fokiyama Shigo de Amaula Ahumeseko Fokiyama
Institut Cheikh Maulana Mohamed Ali. Donc ici c'est l'Institut Maulana Cheikh Mohamed Ali qui a pour but de propager le Coran, d'étudier le Coran et divulguer le Coran partout dans le monde entier, mais plus précisément en Afrique francophone. Donc le Coran est très bien détaillé, Inch'Allah. C'est ça la salle que je traduis.
Here it is the Institute of Maulana Muhammad Ali for the study of Quran in French, in all countries in Africa where is spoken French.
Ça c'est le Coran traduit par Mohamed Ali. C'est très bien traduit et très important pour nous les Africains, Ouest-Africains. Nous avons apprécié l'explication qu'il y a dedans. Sur ce, nous sommes très contents de recevoir ce Coran. Et ce Coran, aujourd'hui, nous l'allons faire partager partout en Afrique francophone. Inch'Allah.
He said that he is very delighted for the Quran translated by Maulana Muhammad Ali, and he will inshallah impose this Quran in all countries in Africa where it is spoken French.
Donc il est très important de signaler que c'est grâce à Noman et Sayyidat Samina que nous avons réussi à construire ce bâtiment qui représente l'Institut Maulana Mohamed Ali. Donc on dit merci à Cheikh Noman, merci aussi à Sayyidat Samina pour tout ce qu'ils ont fait comme apport, comme geste, comme accompagnement. Merci.
He said that also that Samina and Norman paid the cost of this institute creation, the institute of Maulana Muhammad Ali, and he's very, very happy, and he thanks very much Samina and Norman for the creation of Maulana Muhammad Ali Institute.
الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Donc c'est vraiment le Coran, l'explication est très parfaite. L'explication est très parfaite. Inch'Allah. Inch'Allah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Au nom d'Allah, le bienfaiteur, le miséricordieux, dit, lui Allah est unique, Allah est celui dont tout dépend. Il n'a engendré, il n'engendre pas et il n'est pas engendré. Et nul n'est comme lui, c'est-à-dire nul n'est égal à lui. Ça, c'est l'explication approfondie du Coran que Cheikh Mohammed Ali nous a légué. Cette révélation est l'une des toutes premières de Makkah, unique. Les erreurs fondamentales et de plusieurs religions, y compris d'autres religions en 4 courtes phrases. Le premier verset proclame l'unicité absolue de l'être divin et d'autres et porte un coup mortel à toutes les formes de polythéisme, y compris les doctrines de la Trinité. Donc voilà, ce livre nous indique uniquement l'unicité approfondie de Dieu, et ici il a évoqué d'autres religions qui sont dans l'erreur et qui sont dans l'égarement, pour dire qu'il n'y a qu'un seul Dieu, et les techniques de d'autres croyances appartenant à d'autres divinités sont rendues nulles et vaines à travers l'explication ici, qui est l'explication réelle même du Saint-Coran, à travers le Qur'an.
Sheikh told about Maulana Muhammad Ali translation in this Quran. He said that it is very useful for Muslim community, and he told many things important in this book. And this Quran of Maulana Muhammad Ali will be useful for our community, for Malian Muslim community, and African Muslim community where French is spoken.
Sera d'une importance très capitale pour nous. C'est très important qu'on ait vraiment le centre. Ça nous a apporté beaucoup d'avantages sur beaucoup de plans, et nous avons espoir pour ce centre qui soit vraiment le noyau de l'Afrique pour alimenter toutes ces connaissances de
This institute is very useful for our community, for our Muslim community around this institute, for students, and for many Muslim leaders in Mali.
Ici, c'est une salle dans laquelle on apprend. Donc, les cours de nuit, on fait les cours de nuit, on apprend donc, le Coran ici. Donc, on apprend tout. C'est une salle.
Here is the classroom, one of the classroom where I study Quran of Maulana Muhammad Ali.
Bon, à part ici, ici aussi c'est une salle. Donc, ça c'est une autre salle.
Here is another room.
C'est grand.
It's large.
On fait des conférences ici et puis on enseigne le Coran ici encore.
We do many conferences here, and we also can study the Holy Quran here.
Traduire l'ensemble des œuvres, ou bien la majorité des œuvres en langue locale qu'on appelle Bambara. Donc nous voulons traduire, c'est ce que nous vous demandons. Nous demandons à tout le monde de nous aider pour que nous puissions traduire les livres que Cheikh Maulana Mohamed Ali a fait, que ça soit traduit vraiment en Bambara, en langue locale. Inch'Allah, c'est ce que nous demandons.
He said that we want to translate all the books of Maulana Muhammad Ali in our local language, which is Bambara. Bambara, Sheikh thought that he wants to be helped to make all these books of Maulana Muhammad Ali, to translate all this in our language, local language, which is Bambara. Bambara is spoken in Mali, it is spoken in Senegal, in Guinea, in Senegal, in Gambia, in many countries of West Africa. Bambara is spoken. The reason why he wanted to translate all this book of Maulana Muhammad Ali in this language.
Les autres, c'est là où on fait descendre les gens. Ici, c'est la salle des autres. Et puis, on peut immédiatement, dans la salle, il y a même des douches. Voilà.
Here is one of the guest room. The guest room here is one of the guest room.
Ici, c'est le deuxième bureau. Le deuxième de salle pour les autres.
Here is also another guest room. There are also a bathroom.
C'est la deuxième salle où les gens seront. D'accord, ici c'est mon bureau, donc c'est là même que je suis là, tous les jours, tout le moment, c'est le bureau.
Here is the desk of the Grand Sheikh in the institute. Sheikh took a desk in the institute. In every day, in every time, he is here in the institute of Maulana Muhammad Ali. Here is his desk, inshallah. Inshallah, we will put all the equipment here, inshallah.
Ici, l'Institut Cheikh Mohamed Ali, donc, qui est très important pour nous, je répète. Merci à Noman, merci à Samina pour les gestes d'accompagnement qu'ils nous ont fait. Donc c'est un grand bonheur pour nous d'être vraiment dans cet institut Maulana Muhammad Ali.
He said that here is the institute of Maulana Muhammad Ali, and this institute is very useful for our community. It is very, very useful for our community, and this institute, Samina and Norman paid all the cost, and he said thank you to Norman, thank you to Samina, and thank you to all of his community, Ahmadiyya of Lahore community. Thank you to all, to Samina, to Noman, and to all the community of Ahmadiyya of Lahore.
Ici, il y a trois chambres en haut, il y a 3 chambres en bas, il y a un magasin, et puis en tout ça fait 6 chambres. Donc dans les 6 chambres, il y a une direction. En bas, il y a 3. En haut, il y a 3. Il y a un magasin. Donc quand on essaye de voir ça, nous avons une capacité de recevoir plusieurs personnes. Il y a encore, en dehors de la grande salle en bas, on a encore une autre salle pour faire apprendre les gens ici. Nous avons une salle ici encore, ça fait une deuxième salle de classe. En bas, on a une mosquée pour la prière. Donc pour ceux qui veulent prier, on a un endroit où il faut prendre les ablutions que je vais vous montrer.
He said that here are 3 rooms, 2 rooms, 2 guest rooms, and one room one room is a desk of one chef, 1 store, and one big room of conference, and also to study the Quran. If many people come, you can study Quran in this group, big room, in the conference room, and there are a classroom also, 1 classroom, 2 classrooms, 1 big classroom and conference room together, and 1 classroom, especially a classroom, 1 classroom for studying Quran.
Shamsul Awliya, Aunga Shekode, Amaula, Kamarul Awliya, Nurul Anwar, Nurul Anwar, Sirul Asgar.
Inshallah. 1 store in inside, 1 store in Dawan. The prayer ici, inshallah.
Shegode amaula kalande ujiya aunga shegode amaula falato ladumba aunga shegode amaula jigita ujiya
The most of the institutes.
Noroba utigi aunga shegode amaula sabalitigi aunga shegode amaula.
Ici, il y a 3 en bas, il y a 3 en haut. Donc, parmi les 3, il y a un bureau. Donc, ces 3, ce sont là où on loge les gens.
He said that here is a 3 room, 3 guest room. 1, 2, 3 guest room, and the library. Here is 1 guest room. This is 1 bathroom.
Bon, sur chaque chambre, il y a une toilette. Donc, chaque chambre a sa toilette.
He said that in each guest room there are 1 bathroom. In each guest room there are 1 bathroom.
Ya Sayyidi, Ya Sanara, Ya Maulana, Amiko.
Merci, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin. Merci tout le monde. Merci toute la communauté. merci à Norman, merci à Samina. Donc c'est vous qui avez financé tout ce qui est ici. Cet institut a été financé totalement et entièrement. Donc avec la collaboration de la communauté soufie et Norman et Samina qui a été financé et construit, Inch'Allah.
I say that thank you to Norma, thank you to Samina, and thank you to all of your community, your Ahmadiyya Lahore community, and all these institutes will be paid by Samina and Norma. And I say again, thank you very much.